Dust swirled in the slanted afternoon light that pierced the high, arched windows of the Hall of Prophecies, catching in the beams like golden motes suspended in time. The air smelled of old parchment, cold stone, and the faint metallic tang of latent magic. Workers in drab ministry overalls moved quietly, levitating crates of damaged prophecy spheres toward the exit, their wands flicking in careful, measured motions. The war had left its scars, here more than most places, and the ministry had finally approved the long-overdue restoration of the Department of Mysteries. "Check the east wall again," called the foreman, a squat wizard with a thick mustache and a clipboard floating at his elbow. "The schematics show a support column that doesn't line up with the current architecture." A young witch nodded, tapping her wand against the smooth, black stone. "Revelio structura," she murmured. The wall shimmered like heat over pavement. Then, with a soft groan that echoed through the silent hall, a section of the wall peeled away, not crumbling, but folding like a page turning in reverse. Behind it stood a door, not like the others. The 6 great doors of the hall loomed in memory, tall obsidian, etched with constellations and ancient runes that pulsed faintly in the dark. This one was smaller, older, carved from pale weathered oak banded with iron that had turned green with age. It bore no markings at first glance. But as the workers stepped back, hesitant, the runes began to glow. Faint at first, then stronger, spiraling outward from the center in a language none of them recognized. One of the younger wizards reached out. "Should we—" "Step back," snapped the foreman. "That's not on the star. A star on star of the plans." Within minutes, a Patronus, a sleek otter, raced through the corridors of the ministry, winding its way to the office of the deputy head of magical law enforcement. It arrived with Hermione Granger's voice, urgent and clipped. "I need you at the Hall of Prophecies, now, and bring Potter." Harry arrived first, his aurora robes flapping behind him as he strode down the dim passage. He paused at the entrance, breath-catching. He hadn't been back here since the battle. The shelves still bore scorch marks, some spheres shattered beyond repair, others humming faintly with dormant fate, but it was the 7th door that held his gaze. "It wasn't here before," he said quietly. Hermione stepped in behind him, her boots clicking on the stone. It was hidden, not just warded, star erased star from perception. The concealment charm would have affected anyone who passed by, even obliviated their memory of it if they got too close. Harry turned to her. "Who could do that?" "Someone who wanted it found only under very specific conditions," she said, voice low, "or by very specific people." They approached together, as they always had. The air thickened the closer they got, humming with a resonance that made Harry's scar prickle, not with pain, but awareness. The door's surface rippled. Then slowly, a single prophecy sphere materialized on a pedestal before it, clear and empty as untouched glass. Hermione exhaled. "It's blank." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, as if sensing their presence, the sphere began to glow. Lines of silver light etched themselves across its surface, words forming in real time, curling like smoke made solid. The language was not English, nor Latin, nor any tongue Harry recognized. But as they watched, the script shifted, reformed, translated. Star. When the scarred seeker and the mind unbound stand together before the forgotten threshold, the 7th door shall open, and time will speak anew. Star Harry looked at Hermione. She was already pulling out her wand, muttering incantations under her breath, scanning the sphere for enchantments, for traps. "Do you think it's about us?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. The words in the sphere pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. "I think," she said softly, "it's been waiting for us all along." The air in the Hall of Prophecies had always carried a hush, a reverence that settled over the shoulders like a cloak. Tonight it felt heavier, charged with something unseen. Harry stepped carefully between the towering shelves, his boots whispering against the obsidian floor, the dim blue light of the prophecy spheres casting long wavering shadows. Beside him, Hermione moved with quiet precision, her fingers brushing the spines of the glass orbs, as if reading Braille only she could decipher. They had been summoned in the dead of night, a rare urgent notice from the newly appointed head of the Department of Mysteries, a stern-faced witch named Thorn, who spoke in clipped tones and refused to elaborate. "You need to see it," she'd said. "Both of you." And then they saw it. At the far end of the hall, where the shelves curved into darkness, a seventh door stood slightly ajar. It shouldn't have been there. Harry stopped short, his breath catching. He had walked this hall before, after the battle, during the trials, in the quiet years of Reconstruction, but never had he seen a seventh door. 5, yes, 6, certainly. But 7, no. That defied everything they knew. The door was wrought of black iron, ancient and pitted with runes that pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. The metal was cold to the touch, and when Harry reached out, hesitant, his fingers tingled with a sensation like static in memory. Hermione stepped forward, her wand raised, its tip glowing a soft amber, as she whispered a diagnostic charm. The spell curled around the door like smoke, then vanished. "It's not just hidden," she murmured. "It's star-bound star, layers of concealment, temporal, spatial, linguistic. Someone didn't want this found, not for centuries." Harry glanced at her. "And now it's open." And she didn't answer. They pushed the door together, the hinges groaning, as if waking from a long sleep. Inside, the chamber was small, circular, with no shelves, no dust, no signs of age, only a single pedestal in the center. Upon it rested a prophecy sphere. But it was blank, not cracked, not shattered, not even cloudy. Just empty. A perfect orb of glass, glowing faintly from within, as though waiting. Hermione approached first, cautious, her eyes narrowed in thought. Prophecies are recorded at the moment of utterance. They don't form later. "Unless they're not recorded yet," Harry said quietly. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "That would mean it's being written now." A beat of silence. Then, without warning, a thin line of light appeared on the surface of the sphere. It curled like ink in water, forming a single rune, old, angular, unfamiliar. Harry stepped closer, his pulse quickening. Another symbol followed, then another, each one etching itself with deliberate slowness, as though the glass were breathing words into existence. Hermione pulled out her notebook, already sketching the symbols. "This isn't standard prophetic script. It's older, possibly pre-Hogwarts. I've seen something like this in the ruins at Bring Care, Welsh, maybe, or Celtic." Harry watched, mesmerized as the light continued to flow. The air grew thick, humming with a low resonance that vibrated in his teeth. He felt it then, a pull, not in his body, but in his chest, like a thread tied to his ribs, tugging towards something far away. "Do you feel that?" he asked. Hermione looked up, her eyes wide. "Yes, it's calling." The last symbol flared to life, and the sphere dimmed, the light retreating into its core. The writing was complete, a short phrase in a language neither of them fully understood, yet somehow Harry Starr knew Star. This was only the beginning, and somewhere, deep beneath the earth, or beyond the sea, something ancient had just begun to wake. Dust hung in the air like powdered silver, catching the dim blue glow of the prophecy shelves as Harry stepped forward, his boots quiet against the cold stone. The chamber was unnaturally still, no echo, no breath, just the faint hum of ancient magic pressing against the walls. To either side, row upon row of glass orbs shimmered with recorded destinies, their labels faded or flickering. But all eyes were on the seventh door. It hadn't been there a week ago. Hidden behind a false archway sealed with runes older than Hogwarts, it had only revealed itself after a tremor, unfelt anywhere else in London, shook the lowest level of the Department of Mysteries. Now, standing before it, Harry felt the air thicken, his scar tingling with a dull, insistent pulse. Not pain, not any more, but awareness. Hermione stood beside him, her fingers curled tightly around the strap of her satchel. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the blank prophecy sphere resting on the pedestal before the door. The sphere that had been empty when they arrived. Now faint silver lines began to spiral across its surface, like veins of moonlight threading through obsidian. "It's reacting to us," she whispered. Harry didn't answer. He didn't need to. He felt it, the pull, the recognition, as if something long buried had just exhaled. Unspeakables lined the periphery, cloaked in their featureless gray, silent and watchful. Only one had spoken. "Do not touch it, not yet." but no one had said why. And now, as the first words etched themselves into the glass, even their stillness wavered. Star, when the keepers return, the door remembers. The script glowed, faded, then reignited with a deeper luster. Hermione inhaled sharply. That's not old tongue. Not exactly. It's a hybrid. Proto-Romanian with traces of Druidic binding. Harry finished. She turned to him, startled. You know that? I heard it once. In a dream, or maybe a memory. I'm not sure which. Her expression softened, just for a moment, before she looked back at the sphere. The words were shifting now, rearranging like liquid stars. The seventh lock opens not to blood, nor to power, but to the echo of two hearts that never spoke. Star, a hush, fell so complete that Harry could hear the faint creak of Hermione adjusting her stance. He glanced at her. Her cheeks were flushed, her breath shallow. She wouldn't meet his eyes. That's personal, she murmured. Or calculated, Harry said, though his voice lacked conviction. Maybe it's testing us. Or confirming something. Another line formed, curling like smoke. Stark, seek the hollow crown beneath the weeping stone. Where the forgotten oath was broken, let the twin flames rekindle. The star, the moment the last word appeared, the sphere pulsed, a wave of light rippling outward, brief but intense. One of the unspeakables staggered back, clutching his chest. The door behind the pedestal groaned, a seam of light appearing along its frame. Hermione reached for her wand. It's unlocking. Harry placed a hand on her arm. Wait. He didn't know why he stopped her. Instinct, fear, or something deeper, something that had lived in the silence between them for years. The unspoken words, the glances held too long, the way she still tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way he still noticed. The air smelled of ozone and old parchment. The sphere dimmed, but the words remained. We should go, Hermione said, her voice low, before they seal it again, before someone decides we're a threat. Harry nodded. Together? She looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time in years he saw not the war survivor, not the brilliant witch, but the girl who had followed him into the Chamber of Secrets, who had faced time itself for him. Yes, she said. Together. And as the door's light widened into a sliver of silver, neither of them moved away. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windowpane of the small, walled garden, flat above a bookshop in Diagon Alley. The air smelled of damp parchment and chamomile, and the faint glow of a single candle flickered across Hermione's face as she turned the page of an ancient text bound in cracked dragon hide. Across from her, Harry sat with one knee pulled up, his fingers absently tracing the rim of a chipped teacup. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full, like the quiet after a storm, thick with memories and the comfort of years. You think it's deliberate, Harry said, at last, voice low. Hermione didn't look up. I think nothing about that door was accidental. Not the concealment charm, not the blank orb, not the way it wrote, only when we stood together. Harry exhaled, long and slow. It's been years, Hermione. Why now? Because it was waiting, she said, finally lifting her eyes. Waiting for the right moment. Or the right people. He met her gaze, and, for a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them, something that had lived in the spaces between words since the war, since Hogwarts, since the tent in the forest where she'd read and he'd kept watch. Old instincts stirred, the kind that didn't need spells to feel. You still carry your wand in your left sleeve, he observed. She smiled feebly. And you still check the exits when you walk into a room. A beat, then a shared look, half amusement, half melancholy. We haven't done this in a long time, he said. Worked a mystery together. No, not since we had to. Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But we're doing it again. We are, she agreed. And this time, it's not Voldemort. It's not even about survival. It's older, deeper. Feels like it's about us, he murmured. She blinked. What? The prophecy, whatever it is, it wrote itself when Star approached. Not Kingsley, not even Rowan. Star us. Star Hermione. Turn the book closed with deliberate care. Maybe it's not about us personally. Maybe we're just the key. Or maybe, Harry said, voice softer now, it's saying something we've been avoiding. The candle flickered. Outside, a gust of wind sent rain skittering across the glass. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small folded piece of parchment, thin, almost translucent, marked with symbols, that shimmered faintly under the light. "This came from the archives at Hogwarts," she said, "buried under a false panel in the restricted section. It references a group called the Star Ordo Septimus Star, the Seventh Order. They were said to guard forgotten truths, temples, ley lines, prophecies that didn't fit the seer's canon." Harry studied the markings. "And this connects to the door. They believed time wasn't linear," she said, "that certain moments, certain star pairs could open doors that others couldn't. They called them star echo binding star." He looked at her. "Pairs? Two souls aligned across trials, choices, sacrifice, bound not by blood or romance, but by something forged." Harry's throat tightened. "You think that's us?" "I think," she said slowly, "that we've always been more than just friends or survivors. We've been a balance. You with your instinct, your connection to magic that defies reason. Me with research, logic, the need to understand. Together, we've done what neither could alone." He swallowed. "Even after everything, especially after everything." A silence settled, but it was different now. Charged, fragile, like the air before a spell takes hold. Harry reached out, not quite touching the parchment, but brushing his fingers against the edge of the table, close to hers. "We used to trust each other with our lives," he said. "We still do," she whispered. He looked up, and this time he didn't look away. The candlelight caught the gold in her eyes, the faint lines at their corners, years of laughter, of worry, of sleepless nights spent chasing answers. "So," he said, voice steady now, "where do we start?" Hermione unfolded the parchment fully. "There's a ruin in the Lake District, a stone circle older than Stonehenge. The notes say it's where the Order met under the winter moon." Harry stood, rolling his shoulders back, the old fire kindling in his chest. "Then we go tonight." She smiled, a real one, bright and sure. "Just like old times. Better," he said. "This time, we're choosing it." The air in the Ministry's Department of Mysteries archives was thick with the scent of aged parchment and cold stone, a silence so complete it seemed to press against Hermione's eardrums like underwater pressure. She stood before the towering row of mahogany cabinets, their brass labels dulled by time, each one denoting a decade of magical record-keeping. Her fingers traced the edge of the drawer, labeled Star 1600 1700, architectural anomalies and concealment charms. Star, the very section she needed. With a soft click, she pulled it open. Empty. Not merely disorganized. Empty. The slots where scrolls and folios should have rested were hollow, as if something had been neatly excised from existence. She blinked, then moved to the next drawer. Star 1700 1800. Prophecy Chamber Modifications Star. Same result. The third, fourth, even the auxiliary cabinets, cleared out with surgical precision. Not a scrap of paper, not a single ink stain remained. "This can't be right," she murmured more to herself than anyone. Her breath fogged slightly in the chill. She tapped her wand against the drawer's edge. "She Star Revelio Historica Star." A faint shimmer passed over the empty space, then collapsed inward, like a sigh. The spell detected no concealment, no illusion. The records weren't hidden. They were gone. She stepped back, frowning. This wasn't just bureaucratic negligence. This was obliteration, the kind only achieved by powerful, deliberate magic, something not even the Death Eaters had managed during their brief reign. The Ministry's archives were enchanted to regenerate lost texts, to resist fire, theft, obliviation, for entire decades to vanish without a trace. That required a level of authority few possessed. A soft footfall echoed behind her. "Hermione?" She turned. Harry stood in the archway, his Auror's cloak dusted with rain from the Ministry's flu network. His expression was cautious, familiar lines of concern etched around his eyes. "I can't find anything," she said, voice tight. "Every record referencing structural changes to the Hall of Prophecies, every mention of sealed chambers, hidden doors, ancient wards, it's all been erased, not just removed." Star unwritten star. Harry stepped forward, running a hand over the inside of one of the drawers. Like someone went back and altered history. Worse, she said. They didn't alter it. They star it. There's no trace, no residue, not even a memory echo. It's as if those records never existed. He looked at her. The seventh door. She nodded. Someone didn't just seal it. They made sure no one would ever know to look for it. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the absence pressing down. Then Harry asked, "Who could do this?" "Only someone with access to the highest levels of archival magic," she said. "A keeper of records, maybe. But they're bound by oath. Or," she hesitated, "or what? Or someone who helped write the Ministry's foundational enchantments. Someone from before the International Statute of Secrecy, maybe even before Hogwarts was built." Harry exhaled slowly. "An old order, the kind that wouldn't want to be found," she said. "And if they're still around, they'll know we're looking." Outside, a low roll of thunder shook the Ministry's foundations. The lamps flickered, once, twice, then steadied. But in the corner of the archive, where the shadows clung thickest, a single drawer creaked open on its own. Hermione's wand was in her hand instantly. That one wasn't locked. Harry moved to her side. Together they approached. Inside the drawer lay a single brittle piece of parchment, yellowed at the edges. It bore no title, no date. Just a single line of faded ink, written in a hand that looked centuries old. "Star. The door remembers what the world forgets." Hermione reached for it. But as her fingers neared, the parchment crumbled to ash, swirling into the air like smoke before vanishing entirely. Neither of them spoke. Then Harry said, "We're not the first to come looking." "No," Hermione whispered, "but we might be the first they want to find." The Ministry was never truly silent. But at this hour, its usual hum had settled into something deeper, older, an echo of stone and spellwork breathing in the dark. Harry stood just inside the arched threshold of the Hall of Prophecies, arms folded, breathed slow. The air tasted of dust and ozone, the faint residue of centuries of magic pressed into glass and marble. The new door, seventh, always seventh, loomed ahead, its obsidian frame still slick with the afterglow of the unlocking charm. Hermione had spent 3 sleepless nights deciphering. It had been 2 days since the sphere had first reacted, since the blank surface had shimmered like disturbed water, and begun writing in luminous script, 1 line at a time. They'd transcribed everything. Cross-referenced names, mapped symbols. But now, in the stillness after midnight, something else was happening. Harry stepped forward, boots muffled against the cold floor. The sphere hovered in its cradle, no larger than a snitch, yet pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light, like a heart beneath glass. Then it whispered, not loud, not even directed, just a breath of sound curling through the chamber, half memory, half dream. "Star, Care Cindelin," beneath the twin stones. Harry froze. "Hermione." She was already beside him, wand tip glowing with a soft star, Limos star, Inai, eyes wide. "Did you hear?" Another whisper, softer this time, layered with the echo of wind across moors. "Avalok's forge, where fire sleeps in stone." Hermione exhaled sharply. "Avalok, that's old Brythonic. A smith god, or so the texts say. Not worshipped, not quite, revered. There's a ruin in the Lake District. Some think it's tied to him, buried beneath what's now Wastwater." Harry glanced at her. "You're saying this thing's giving us locations?" "If it's not just random fragments," she said, though her fingers were already flipping through the leather-bound journal tucked under her arm. "But the cadence, it's too structured, and it only speaks when we're both near." As if in answer, the sphere dimmed, then flared again. New words shimmered into existence along its surface, spiraling slowly. "The hand that wrote the sky, seeks the mouth of the silent river." Hermione's breath caught. "The hand that wrote the sky, that's from the Sibylline fragments, supposedly a title for the first seers. But the mouth of the silent river, that's not in any record I've seen." Harry reached out, not touching, just feeling the warmth radiating from the glass. "It's guiding us, not telling us what to do, just showing the way." A pause, then faintly, like a voice from underwater. "Ilara, remember the silver door?" Hermione stiffened. "Who's Ilara?" Harry asked quietly. I don't know, she said too quickly. Her eyes darted to the sphere, then away. I mean, I've never read that name in connection with prophecy. Not in the archives, not in the old times. But her fingers tightened on the journal. Harry studied her. He'd known her too long to miss the tremor in her voice, the slight flush creeping up her neck. You're holding something back. It's just a name, she said. But her gaze flickered to the sphere again. There's a legend, minor, obscure, about a woman named Alara, who was said to have guarded the first veil. Before the Deathly Hallows, before even the Potters, before anything. They say she wasn't human, or not entirely, that she could walk between time and memory. And the silver door? A threshold, a choice. One version says she sealed herself behind it to keep something from waking. The sphere pulsed once, brighter, and then, for the first time, fell completely dark. Silence crashed in. Harry turned to her. You think this is connected to us, not just the mission. You. Hermione didn't answer at first. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. I've been having dreams, Harry, about a door, about a woman calling my name. I thought it was stress, or guilt, or, I don't know, but now. She stopped, looked at the sphere, looked at him, and in that moment, the air between them shifted, charged, fragile, like the space before a spell breaks. The air in the Wizengummel chamber was thick with the scent of old parchment and lingering enchantments, the high vaulted ceiling humming faintly with containment wards. Some light filtered through enchanted stained glass depicting Merlin and Morgana in solemn truce, cast fractured blue and silver patterns across the semicircular tiers of stone benches. At the center, Harry stood with his hands clasped behind his back, shoulders squared, while Hermione stood beside him, her gaze steady on the assembled witches and wizards. The seventh door had been discovered 3 days prior, and already the magical world felt unbalanced, as if reality itself had shifted beneath their feet. Minister Amelia Bones rose, her voice clear and measured. We are not here to panic. We are here to decide, do we investigate, or do we seal it permanently? A murmur rippled through the chamber. From the far left, Cornelius Fudge, now a lesser counselor after his fall from power, leaned forward. Containment is the only sensible course. A door that writes its prophecy star in front of witness's star. That defies all known magical law. It could be a trap, a lure, or worse, a breach in the veil between worlds. But it responded to star them star. 3. Interrupted Augusta Longbottom, her voice sharp as a blade. She gestured toward Harry and Hermione. Not to aurors, not to unspeakables. To star them star, that is not coincidence. That is not coincidence. That is design, Sari. Exhaled slowly. He remembered the moment, how the blank sphere had begun to glow, as if ignited from within, letters forming like molten silver, curling into words only he and Hermione could read. Star, seek the roots beneath the standing stones. The seventh key lies where time forgets kings. Star, he had felt it then, a pull, deep in his bones, as if the door had been waiting. Hermione spoke now, her voice calm but firm. The door isn't dangerous by nature. It's star-responsive star. It activated only when approached by those it recognizes. That suggests intent, purpose. If we seal it, we may be silencing a warning, or a message meant for this moment, or awakening something better, left buried, countered Bartholomew Knott, his tone laced with suspicion. Who among us can say what ancient magic might be tied to such a thing? The Department of Mysteries has spent centuries studying the known prophecies. This star, seventh door star, was hidden for a reason. And yet, interjected Kingsley Shacklebolt, his deep voice cutting through the tension, we have evidence that the door is tied to an order long thought mythical, the oracles of Athelred. Artifacts bearing their sigil have been found beneath Stonehenge, and recent disturbances in the ley lines across southern Britain align with their recorded patterns of activation. A hush fell. Hermione turned to him, eyes alight. You've seen the reports from Glastonbury Tor? Kingsley nodded. Residual magic. Patterns of light in the mist. Not random, structured, like a signal. Fudge scoffed. Ghosts and folklore. Are we to chase fairy tales now? No, Harry said, stepping forward. were to follow evidence. The prophecy didn't just appear. Its star chose star to appear, and it pointed us toward places. Places with history, with power. If there's a thread, we should pull it. Not out of curiosity, but because ignoring it could cost us more than investigating it. The chamber stilled. Even the ever-present hum of the ward seemed to pause. Minister Bones studied them both. Harry, scar faint beneath his fringe, resolve etched in the lines of his jaw. Hermione, fingers twisting absently around the strap of her enchanted satchel, mind racing behind her steady gaze. Finally, she spoke. Then we move cautiously. A task force, small, discreet. Harry Potter and Hermione Granger will lead it, with oversight from the Department of Mysteries, and direct reporting to this council. No public disclosure, no reckless expeditions. We seek understanding, not glory. A few members protested, but the motion passed by narrow margin. As they stepped out of the chamber, the weight of the decision settled like a cloak across Harry's shoulders. Hermione glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "This isn't just about a prophecy, is it?" she asked softly. "No," he admitted. "It feels like the beginning of something. I don't know what yet." She nodded, and for a heartbeat their eyes held, years of unspoken words hanging between them, fragile as the glowing script on a glass sphere. Then she turned, and together they walked toward the ministry atrium, where the fountain shimmered with renewed magic, and the world waited, just on the edge of change. The air in the Hall of Prophecies was still, thick with the scent of dust and old magic. Harry stood with his hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the newly revealed door, black as obsidian, its surface etched with runes that seemed to shift when stared at too long. The sphere within, once blank as untouched snow, now pulsed with a faint silver light. Words had begun to form, slow and deliberate, like ink bleeding through parchment. Hermione crouched close, her fingers hovering just above the glass. "It's not in any dialect I've seen," she murmured. "Not Latin, not Old Gaelic, but there's a rhythm to it, almost like a cipher." Harry leaned in. "Can you read it?" "Not all of it, but this phrase, star, where the raven speaks to the stone star, that repeats. And look, the letters shimmer when we're both near. It's responsive, as if its star knows star who's standing here." He frowned. "So it only shows us what we're meant to see, or what we're meant to find together?" They left the ministry under cover of twilight, wrapped in invisibility cloaks, and silence. The weight of what they'd seen clung to them. This wasn't just another mystery. This was something older, something deliberate. Someone had hidden this door for a reason, and now it had chosen to reveal itself to them. It took Hermione 3 sleepless nights in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library. She'd borrowed McGonagall's permission with a carefully worded letter, to cross-reference the phrase with ancient monastic records. "There was an order," she said at last, voice hushed with awe. "The Star Custodes Vocis Star. The keepers of the voice. They lived in isolation, mostly in the Highlands, preserving knowledge long before the ministry, or even Hogwarts existed. They believed in star-living prophecies, star, not spoken, but written into the world itself. Stones, trees, rivers, they said truth could be found in resonance." Harry stirred his tea, watching the steam curl like phantom fingers. And the raven. In their texts, the raven wasn't a bird, it was a symbol, the watcher, the messenger between worlds, the one who sees what others cannot. She looked up, eyes bright. "There's a ruin in Sutherland, a monastery marked only as Caer Denny on a 12th century map, abandoned after a fire in 1318. But according to a marginal note in a monk's diary, star, the raven still speaks at dawn. Star, they apparated to a windswept moor under a bruised sky. The air tasted of peat and salt. Before them, half swallowed by heather and thyme, stood the crumbling arch of what might once have been a gate. Stone walls, knee-high in places, traced the shape of a cloister. A single standing pillar, carved with a spiral that never quite reached its end, stood sentinel in the center. "This is it," Hermione whispered, stacing forward. "The alignment matches the diagrams. And look, the carvings on the base." Harry knelt. The symbols were worn, softened by centuries of wind and rain. But beneath the grime, something glimmered. He brushed away the moss. There, etched in a circle, were 7 runes, one matching the doors. As his fingers touched the stone, warmth spread up his arm. Hermione gasped. "Harry, your scar." He touched his forehead. It wasn't pain, not exactly. More like a hum, low and steady, as if something deep inside had begun to resonate. Above them, a shadow passed. A raven circled once, twice, then landed on the pillar. It tilted its head, one dark eye fixed on them. Then it spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but in memory. An image flooded Harry's mind. A tower beneath a blood-red moon. A woman with silver hair kneeling before a mirror filled with stars. And a voice thin as mist. "Star, the 7th door opens not to fate, but to choice." "Star." The raven took flight. Hermione grabbed his arm. "Did you see that?" He nodded, breathless. "And I think it's only the beginning." The air inside the monastery was thick with the scent of damp stone and something older, charred parchment, perhaps, or the ghost of extinguished incense. Moonlight filtered through the cracked stained glass above, painting fractured hues across the moss-slick floor. Harry stepped carefully over a collapsed beam, his boots crunching on fragments of shattered pottery. Every shadow seemed to breathe. He flicked his wand, Lumos, and the tip flared to life, casting long, trembling shapes against the crumbling walls. Hermione was already ahead, crouched beside a recessed alcove, her fingers tracing symbols etched into the stone. "These aren't in any dialect I've seen," she murmured, brushing away centuries of grime. "Not Latin, not Old English, maybe Proto-Gaelic. There's a celestial motif running through them, stars, constellations. Look here." Harry knelt beside her. The runes spiraled outward from a central glyph, a circle pierced by a vertical line, its upper half crowned with 3 small dots. His breath caught. "That's the same symbol on the 7th door." She turned to him, eyes wide in the dim light. "Exactly. And it's not just similar, it's identical. The proportions, the flourishes. This predates the ministry by centuries, possibly millennia." A cold draft stirred the silence, making the flame in Harry's wand waver. He glanced over his shoulder. The monastery was a ruin now, nestled in the highlands of northern Scotland, abandoned since the 12th century according to the records Hermione had unearthed. But someone, or something, had been here recently. A scattering of fresh footprints, too large to be animal, led toward the eastern wing. "We're not alone," he whispered. Hermione didn't argue. She stood slowly, drawing her wand. If this place was part of the Order's network, it might hold more than just carvings. They wouldn't leave knowledge like this unprotected. They moved together down a narrow corridor, the walls narrowing like a throat. The runes reappeared there, deeper, more intricate, etched not just into stone but into the very mortar. Some seemed to shift under the light as if responding to their presence. Then Harry saw it. In the center of what must have once been a meditation chamber, a stone dais rose from the floor. On its surface, a single sphere rested, cracked, dull, but unmistakable. It looked like a prophecy orb, but this one wasn't blank. Words glowed faintly within its core, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Hermione stepped forward, hesitant. "It's active, but how? This place has been abandoned for centuries." Harry reached out, then paused. "Last time we touched one of these, it played a message. But this one, it's writing something new." As if in answer, fresh lines of script began to form inside the orb, curling like smoke. The language was unfamiliar, but the rhythm felt deliberate, purposeful. And then, a sound, a whisper in the dark. They turned, footsteps. 2, maybe 3 people, moving fast. Hermione's hand found his. "We need to go, now." But Harry hesitated, staring at the orb. The final line of text had just finished forming. It read, "Star, when the 7th seal breaks, the sky will remember what the earth has forgotten. Star." The footsteps grew louder. "We'll come back," he said, voice low. Hermione nodded, but her grip tightened. "They're not just following us, Harry. They're waiting, watching. This isn't just about the prophecy anymore." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. As they slipped through a side passage, the orb dimmed behind them, its message delivered, its purpose fulfilled. And now, and deep beneath the earth, something ancient stirred. The fire crackled low between them, casting long, dancing shadows against the moss-covered stones of the ruined monastery. Outside, a thin mist crept through the broken arches, muffling the distant hoot of an owl. The air smelled of damp earth, wood smoke, and the faint metallic tang of ancient wards, still faintly humming beneath their feet, remnants of a time when this place had pulsed with secret magic. Hermione sat with her knees drawn up, wrapped in a thick woolen cloak, her fingers curled around a chipped mug of tea. She stared into the flames, not speaking, her face softened by the glow. Harry sat across from her, his back against a fallen column, one arm resting over his bent knee. He watched her more than the fire. They hadn't spoken much since setting up camp. The day had been long, scaling the cliffs of Dunscathon, deciphering Gaelic runes beneath a crumbling altar, arguing over the meaning of a star map etched into the stone floor. But now in the hush of night, the tension had bled away, replaced by something quieter, something older. "You used to do that," Hermione said suddenly, her voice low. Harry blinked. "Do what?" "Stare. When we were at Hogwarts, during patrols, you'd look at me like you were trying to solve a riddle. Only you could see." He looked down, brushing ash from his fingers. "Maybe I was." She smiled, just slightly, and took a slow sip of tea. "And did you ever solve it?" He met her eyes again. "I don't know. I thought I had. Then I'd lose the thread." The fire popped, sending up a shower of embers that spiraled into the dark. Somewhere beyond the ruins, a fox cried out. A sharp, lonely sound. "It's strange," she murmured, "how we spent years fighting side by side, surviving things no one should have to, and yet we never really talked star." "Not about the important things," Harry agreed. "No, not about the things that kept us awake." He exhaled, long and slow. "I used to dream about you after the war. Not like that. At first, just, you'd be there in Grimmauld Place, or the Burrow, and you'd say something simple. 'Tea's ready,' or 'Did you finish your report?' And I'd wake up aching, because it felt so real. And then I'd remember you were gone, to the ministry, to research, to everything I wasn't part of anymore." Hermione's breath caught just slightly. "I didn't know. You wouldn't. I never told you." She set her mug aside and pulled her legs closer. "I thought you needed space. After everything, I thought you wanted to forget." "I didn't want to forget you." Silence settled again, but it was different now. Thicker, charged. The kind of quiet that hums with unspoken words. "I wrote you letters," she admitted, almost too softly to hear. "Dozens of them. Never sent a single one." Harry stilled. "Why not?" "Because I was afraid. Afraid of what I might say. Afraid you'd read them, and finally see how much I never let you know." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And do you still feel that way?" She looked up, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with something fiercer. "Does it matter? We're chasing a prophecy, Harry. Ancient magic, secret orders, people trying to kill us before dawn. This us, it can't fit in that world. Then, maybe the world needs to change," he said. "Because I can't keep pretending I don't feel it too. Every time you solve a riddle before I do. Every time you roll your eyes at my terrible jokes. Every time you walk ahead of me through some cursed ruin, and I have to remind myself not to reach for your hand." He stopped. So did the world. Hermione's lips parted. The fire dimmed, as if holding its breath. "Harry, I've loved you," he said, quiet but certain. "In every life I've lived, maybe not always the right way, maybe not in time, but always." Outside, the wind shifted. The mist curled like a question around the stones, and for the first time in years, neither of them looked away. The air in the Hall of Prophecies had never felt heavier. Dust motes hung suspended in the dim blue-tinged light, caught in the eerie stillness that followed the moment the blank orb flared to life. Harry stood inches from the pedestal, his breath shallow, eyes fixed on the swirling silver script, now etching itself across the glass surface. Hermione's fingers trembled as she reached out, not toward the sphere, but toward the ancient sigil carved into the stone frame around the newly revealed seventh door. It was unlike any of the others, no name, No date, only a complex knot of interwoven lines and runes that seemed to shift when stared at too alone. The moment they'd stepped forward together, the sigil had pulsed with a soft amber glow. "Don't," Harry said quietly, though he didn't pull her back. "It's responding to us," she whispered. "To both of us. Did you see the sphere?" The words only appeared when we were standing side by side. He glanced at her, the faint luminescence catching the gold in her brown eyes. Years of silence hovered between them, unspoken words buried beneath post-war reconstruction, rebuilding lives, choosing paths that never quite led back to each other. But now, here, in this forgotten chamber beneath the ministry, something ancient was awakening, and it knew their names. Hermione exhaled. "It wants to be touched, together." Harry hesitated only a second before placing his hand beside hers on the sigil. The stone was warm, unnaturally so, like sun-baked marble in midsummer. A low hum vibrated through the floor, rising through their bones. Then, light erupted from the center of the sigil, spiraling upward in a helix of gold and indigo. They stepped back, but the projection had already begun. Before them, shimmering in the air like smoke given form, stood robed figures, 12 of them, hooded and tall, their faces obscured by shifting veils of light. They stood in a circle around a stone dais bearing a door identical to the one behind them. The scene was silent at first, as if the magic needed time to remember its voice. Then a single figure raised a hand, and the room filled with a voice that was not a voice, more like thought, given sound, ancient and layered with echoes. "Star, the seventh door is not a prophecy. Star," it intoned, "star, but a covenant. It does not speak of what will be, but of what may awaken." Star, Hermione's fingers curled into her robes. "A covenant? With whom? Star." "We who came before you sealed it with our lives." Star, the figure continued. "Star, not to hide but to protect. The door is not a lock, but a threshold, and thresholds require balance. Star." The image shifted. The figures were now inscribing the same sigil they had just touched, their hands moving in unison. One by one they placed their palms upon it, and one by one they crumbled to ash, absorbed into the stone. Harry swallowed hard. They died to seal it, Star. Only when both heart and mind reach for truth may the seal be broken, Star, the voice said. "Star, but know this once opened, the door does not return. The world will shift, not by war, not by wand, but by revelation." "Star," the projection flickered. For a moment the figures turned as one, their veils parting just enough to reveal eyes that glowed like distant stars. Then the image collapsed inward, the light retreating into the sigil, leaving only silence and the soft throb of magic beneath their feet. Hermione turned to Harry, her voice barely a whisper. "They didn't just lock it away. Star became Star, the lock." He looked at the door, then at her. "And we just woke it up." Outside the hall, deep in the ministry's lower corridors, something stirred. A shadow that moved against the flow of air, slipping through stone like water through cracks. Watching, waiting. And above London, unnoticed by any, the stars blinked once, out of sequence. The air inside the Department of Mysteries had always carried a chill, but this was different, a deep, ancient cold that seeped through robes and settled in the marrow. Harry stood with his back to the newly revealed door, its surface still shimmering faintly with residual enchantment. The blank sphere had begun to glow, the moment Hermione's fingers brushed the glass, and now, minutes later, the words had finished writing themselves in a looping, archaic script that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Neither of them dared speak. "It's not in any language I recognize," Hermione murmured, eyes scanning the prophecy's script with a mixture of awe and frustration. Her wand hovered just beneath the sphere, casting a soft blue light across the glyphs. "Not Latin," Harry said. "Not even close." She exhaled sharply. "No, but it's structured. There's syntax here, patterns, almost like coordinates." He frowned. "Coordinates? Not just numbers. Symbols. Constellations, I think." She reached into her satchel and withdrew a charmed notebook, the kind that updated as she wrote. "There's a recurring triad, 3 stars forming a triangle, then a spiral below. I've seen that before, in the old Welsh grimoires." The Cymric circle used celestial alignments to mark hidden wards. Harry watched her sketch feverishly, the lines forming a strange, elegant map in the margins of her notes. "So you're saying this prophecy isn't just words, it's a trail." "A living one," she corrected, voice low. "The sphere didn't just activate when we touched it. Its star responded, star, like it was waiting for us, specifically." A silence settled between them, thick with unspoken weight. Harry stared at the sphere, its light reflecting in Hermione's eyes. He had spent years avoiding this kind of moment, the ones that demanded he look too closely at the space between them, the quiet understanding that had grown heavier with time. But now, with the world tilting on some unseen axis, he couldn't pretend it wasn't there. The notebook suddenly flared with golden light. They both flinched. Hermione gasped, snatching it back as the pages flipped on their own. Ink blued across the parchment, not from her quill, but as if drawn by an invisible hand. Stars emerged, dozens of them, scattering into alignment. Borders formed, rivers, mountains. A map of Europe, but not as Muggles knew it. Here, Stonehenge pulsed with silver. In the Carpathians, a cluster of ruins circled a peak Harry didn't recognize, and in the south, near the ruins of Massalia, a constellation flared brightest of all, the same tribe from the prophecy. "It's evolving," Hermione whispered. "The map, it's responding to the prophecy's activation. Each location is a node, a step." Harry leaned closer, tracing the line from Britain to France with his fingertip. "And we're meant to follow it. We don't even know what we're following." "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "But we know someone's already looking for it." She nodded. They had found traces of tampering in the Ministry's archives, subtle memory charms on clerks, missing records from the 14th century. Someone had spent centuries burying the seventh door. And now it had chosen them. Hermione closed the notebook slowly, its surface still warm. "If this is what I think it is, the Cymric Circle wasn't just a magical society. They were guardians. Of time. Of balance. Balance between what?" She hesitated. "Magic and something older. Something that remembers the world before wands. Before spells. Before us." Outside, a distant alarm rang. Low and muffled, but unmistakable. The Ministry's wards had been breached. Harry drew his wand. "We're out of time." Hermione slipped the notebook into her coat, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Then we start with Stonehenge. It's the first marker, and the most protected." He offered her a small, grim smile. "After you, then." As they moved toward the hidden passage behind the veil chamber, the sphere behind them dimmed. Its message delivered. But deep beneath the Ministry, in the oldest stone, something stirred. A whisper in a language forgotten. A countdown, perhaps, or a welcome. The air in the Department of Mysteries hung thick and still, broken only by the soft hum of dormant enchantments. Moonlight, pale and slivered, slipped through the high, narrow windows of the Hall of Prophecies, casting long shadows across the rows of glass spheres that lined the towering shelves. Most glowed faintly with their stored destinies, but one, set apart, slightly raised on a silver dais, remained dark. The seventh door. It stood ajar now, just an inch, though no one had authorized its opening. A thin line of shadow widened beneath it, then shifted. A figure stepped into the hall, cloaked in charcoal gray, the fabric undulating like smoke, even in the stillness. Boots made no sound on the flagstone, but a faint scent trailed behind, burnt sage and cold iron. The figure paused, scanning the hall with eyes that reflected no light. One gloved hand rose, fingers tracing the air as if reading unseen currents. A whispered incantation, barely more than breath, sent ripples through the silence. The blank sphere on the dais flickered. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, words, not etched, not spoken, but star-written star, as if an invisible quill moved across the glass. Star, when the bridge of stars collapses, the watcher shall awaken. Star. The intruder exhaled sharply. A moment of stillness followed, then fingers flexed beneath the glove. A wand, dark and twisted like petrified root, emerged. No wood Harry recognized. No core he'd ever heard of. "Reveal," the figure murmured, pointing the wand not at the sphere, but at the air above it. Runes flared into existence, angular, archaic, older than Latin. They pulsed once, then shattered into dust. A warning charm. Someone had been here before. The figure cursed under their breath, low and guttural, in a tongue that made the shells tremble. A second spell followed. Star, extra ho verbum, star, designed to pull the prophecy's essence into a vessel. The sphere shivered, resisting. Then a thin thread of light, silver and trembling, began to rise from its surface. Just as it neared the tip of the wand, the distant echo of footsteps rang from the corridor. The intruder froze. Down the hall, torchlight flickered to life. A patrol, early, unexpected. The silver thread snapped, recoiling into the sphere like a wounded serpent. The words on the glass faded, then reappeared, rearranged. Star, the seeker walks with fire in her eyes, but the key lies in silence. Star, the figure stepped back, shadows curling around them like a second cloak. They glanced once at the door, then at the sphere. With a sharp gesture, they flicked their wand toward the ceiling. A ripple spread through the air, and for a moment, the entire hall seemed to breathe star. Then settle, the magic reset. To any observer, it would appear untouched, but the sphere was colder now. And the words, though still glowing faintly, had shifted again. This time in a language no modern wizard could read. The footsteps drew closer. The intruder melted into the darkness between two shelves, becoming nothing more than a suggestion of movement, a breath against stone. When the aura rounded the corner, wand raised, the hall was empty. Only the sphere remained, pulsing once softly, as if in warning. Hours later, in a dimly lit office above Diagon Alley, Hermione Granger sat bolt upright in bed, a book slipping from her lap. Her breath came fast. A dream, no, a vision, of a crumbling bridge made of stars, and a voice whispering in a language she'd never heard, yet somehow understood. She reached for her wand, heart pounding. Somewhere the door was opening, and it was waiting for her. The rain fell in silver sheets over London, softening the edges of the ministry's towering spires into mist and shadow. Inside the Hall of Prophecies, the air still hummed with residual magic, a quiet thrum beneath the silence that followed the revelation. The blank sphere, once inert, now pulsing with faint rhythmic light, had etched its first message in looping archaic script. Star where the stars once guided the seers, so shall they guide the seekers. Star Harry stared at it until his eyes burned, then turned to Hermione, who stood with her arms wrapped around a worn leather satchel, her fingers tracing the embossed constellation map they'd found hidden beneath a false panel in the doorframe. "We're really doing this," he said, voice low. She met his gaze. "We don't have a choice. That prophecy. It wasn't there for centuries, and now it's writing itself. Something's changing. Something's waking." He nodded, shouldering his own pack. The weight of it felt familiar, the weight of unknown roads, of danger just beyond the next hill. It had been years since they'd last traveled like this, since the quiet had settled after the war, and life had, however awkwardly, resumed. Now, the old urgency stirred in his chest, sharpened by something else, something he hadn't let himself name. They apparated to the edge of the Scottish Highlands at dawn, the city's damp chill replaced by crisp, peaty air. The sky above them, clearing after the storm, revealed a scattering of stars still clinging to the fading night. Hermione unfolded the star map with careful hands. The ink shimmered, shifting slightly, as if responding to the celestial bodies above. "It's not just a map," she murmured. "It's a key. These constellations, they align with ancient observatories. The first one, I think it's Caer Sidi, an old Welsh ruin, but wizards believe it was once a seat of the Atheling Order. The who? A pre-Celtic magical sect. They vanished centuries ago. Most historians think they were myth, but their symbols match the carving on the seventh door." Harry exhaled, scanning the horizon. "So we're chasing ghosts." "Not ghosts. Legacy." She looked at him then, her eyes bright with determination. They knew something was coming. Maybe they've been waiting for someone to find that door. They took the night bus at a roadside stone marker, its purple frame rattling as it lurched from the Muggle highway onto a forgotten mountain track. Stan Shunpike barely blinked when he saw them. "Back on adventure, are we, Harry?" Thought you'd gone quiet. Not by choice, Harry said, tossing him a few galleons. Hermione sat by the window, tracing coordinates on the map with her fingertip. Every now and then she'd glance at Harry, brief searching, looks he pretended not to notice. But he felt them, like a warmth behind his ribs. By midday they reached the foot of the Black Mountains. Dare City stood atop a loamy ridge, a ring of weathered stones, half swallowed by bracken and thyme. No muggle would come here. The air itself resisted intrusion. They climbed in silence, boots slipping on moss-slick rock. At the summit, Hermione paused, pulling out her wand. "There's a ward," she whispered. "Old magic. Not hostile, but testing." Harry stepped forward. "Let me." He pressed his palm to the tallest stone. A ripple passed through the ring. The symbols flared in pale gold, then faded. A low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath them trembled. Once, gently, a seam opened in the earth. Hermione looked at him, breath-catching. "You knew that would work. I didn't. But it felt right," she smiled. "Small, soft, the kind that used to unravel him in the library. In the tent, in every quiet moment between battles." "Still reckless," she said. "Still brilliant," he replied. They descended into the dark together, wand light cutting through the stone corridor. The walls were lined with carvings, stars, eyes, hands clasped in oath, and at the center of the chamber a pedestal held a single empty basin. Hermione stepped forward, placing the star map upon it. The basin filled with liquid light. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the Pyrenees like a chorus of forgotten spirits, biting through Harry's cloak with a cold that felt older than memory. Snow clung to the obsidian stones of the abandoned observatory, its spire fractured and leaning, as though the mountain itself had rejected the structure. Hermione stood before the iron-bound door, her breath a pale mist in the moonlight, fingers tracing the intricate runes etched into the black stone frame. They pulsed faintly under her touch, silver, then dim, then silver again, like a heartbeat buried beneath centuries of silence. "It's keyed to blood and intent," she murmured, pressing her palm flat against the ice-coated metal. "Not just any magic. This is old tongue, older than Hogwarts." Harry stepped closer, the weight of the prophecy sphere in his satchel, a constant, quiet pressure against his back. Since the words had appeared, "Star, seek the 7 stars, where time forgets," the Sky Star, neither of them had slept more than a few broken hours. The Ministry had already sent 2 elves demanding their return. Kingsley's patience, never endless, was wearing thin. "Blood, then," he said, drawing his wand. "You sure this won't trigger a curse?" Hermione glanced at him, a wry smile touching her lips. "If it does, at least we'll die knowing we were right." He barked a laugh, sharp in the thin air, and nicked his thumb with the edge of his wand. She did the same, and together they pressed their bleeding palms to the door. For a long moment, nothing. Then the runes ignited, silver flaring into gold, crawling up the arch like liquid fire. The ground trembled. With a groan of rusted hinges and shifting stone, the door peeled inward, revealing a spiral staircase choked with frost and shadow. The air that rushed out was stale, thick with the scent of old parchment and something else, ozone, like the moment before a storm breaks. They lit their wands, the beings cutting through the darkness as they descended. The steps spiraled deep into the mountain, the walls lined with shattered lenses and broken astrolabes, their glass eyes reflecting the wand light like dead stars. At the bottom, the chamber opened into a vast dome, its ceiling cracked open to the night sky. But the stars above weren't the ones Harry remembered. Constellations shifted, drifted, reformed, moving in slow, impossible patterns. A celestial map out of time. "It's not just an observatory," Hermione whispered, awe softening her voice. "It's a memory. The sky as it was in 1603, or as it was meant to be." Harry stepped forward, his boots crunching on shattered crystal. In the center of the road stood a bronze armillary sphere, its rings askew, coated in dust. As he approached, the metal began to hum, faint at first, then louder, a low, resonant tone that vibrated in his bones. The sphere turned slowly of its own accord, aligning with the shifting stars above. Then the first word appeared in the air, glowing like molten silver. "Star, Veritas. Star, Hermione gasped. It's responding to the prophecy. Another word followed. Star lux. Star. Then a voice, dry as parchment, layered with echoes, spoke from the shadows behind them. You are not the first to come, nor the last. They spun, wands raised. A figure emerged from the darkness, robed in faded indigo, face lined with age and quiet knowing. In one hand, he held a staff crowned with a crystal that pulsed in time with the sphere. The Order of the Seventh Dawn foresaw your arrival, the man said, voice like wind through reeds. But they did not foresee what would happen when the two who defy fate walk the path together. Harry exchanged a glance with Hermione. Her eyes, wide with fear and wonder, held his for a breath too long. The stars are breaking, the old man continued. And you, Harry Potter, you and she, are the fulcrum upon which they turn. The air in the old observatory was thick with dust and the faint metallic tang of ancient enchantments. Moonlight filtered through the cracked glass dome above, painting silver streaks across the stone floor and glinting off the brass rings of a long-dormant orrery. At the room's center, Hermione stood motionless, her fingers tracing the edge of a celestial map etched into the circular table beneath the dome. The map was not of any sky known to modern astronomy. Constellations twisted into sigils, planets labeled in a dialect of Old High Mermish that hadn't been spoken since the fall of Atlantis. It's not a map, she murmured, more to herself than to Harry, who stood by the door, wand out, eyes scanning the shadows. It's a lock. Harry turned, brow furrowed. A lock? She nodded, not looking up. A celestial lock. The stars aren't just symbols, they're coordinates, and they shift. This entire room is calibrated to align with a specific astral configuration, one that only occurs once every 300 years. And that is, tonight, he asked, stepping closer. Tonight, she confirmed, exhaling slowly. The prophecy mentioned the conjunction of the silent star and the weeping moon. I thought it was metaphor. It's not. It's literal. That star, she pointed to a small, dim point of light marked with a rune shaped like a closed eye, is only visible during the lunar eclipse, and only from this latitude. It's been hidden behind the moon's shadow for centuries. Harry looked up through the fractured dome. The moon hung low and coppered in a partial eclipse, its edge frayed with shadow. So what do we do? Hermione moved with sudden purpose, adjusting brass rings on the orrery, aligning tiny spheres to match the positions in the sky. We replicate the alignment, but it's not just about position. It's about resonance. There's a harmonic component. Listen. A faint hum had begun to vibrate through the stone floor, rising from beneath the table. It was barely audible, like the echo of a chime submerged in water. There's a tuning fork, she said, scanning the shelves lined with forgotten instruments. Made of star metal. It should be, yes. She pulled a slender rod from a velvet-lined case, its surface shimmering like cooled meteorite. This reacts to celestial frequencies. If I strike it at the right moment, when the alignment is perfect, it should activate the chamber. And if it's wrong? Harry asked. Then nothing happens, she said, though her voice held an edge he knew well, the one that meant she wasn't telling him the whole truth. He stepped beside her. You've never been wrong before. She gave him a small, grateful smile. Don't jinx it. They waited. The moon crept deeper into shadow. The hum grew stronger, pulsing in time with Hermione's breath. Then, a single, perfect alignment. The silent star blinked into view just beyond the moon's rim. Now, she whispered. She struck the fork against the edge of the orrery. A pure, crystalline tone rang out, clear and impossibly deep, as if the note had traveled light years to reach them. The sound spread through the room like ripples on a pond, touching each constellation on the map. One by one, the etched stars flared to life, glowing with soft blue fire. The floor trembled. With a groan of stone on stone, the center of the room split open. A spiral staircase descended into darkness, lined with runes that ignited as they passed, casting long, dancing shadows. The air that rose from below was warm and carried the scent of parchment and ozone. Harry lit his wand. After you? Hermione hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. After me. They descended in silence, the weight of centuries pressing in around them. At the bottom, they emerged into a chamber no larger than a classroom, its walls covered in flowing script that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. In the center, suspended in midair, hung a single luminous symbol, a spiral with 7 branches, rotating slowly. "It's a language," Hermione breathed. "But not one I've ever seen. It's older than written magic." Harry moved closer to the walls, tracing a line of text with his wand light. "It's talking about balance, a choice, a door that opens not with power, but with sacrifice." She turned to him, eyes wide. "That's the prophecy, not what's on the sphere, but what it's pointing to. The 7th door isn't just a vault, it's a test, and we're standing inside it," he said quietly. Above them, the spiral began to glow brighter. The runes on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns. And then softly a voice, neither male nor female, but layered, like a chorus of whispers from the edge of time, spoke a single sentence in a tongue long forgotten. Hermione gasped. "What?" Harry asked. That was the name," she whispered. "The name of the one who made the prophecy." And for the first time since they'd begun this journey, she looked afraid. Rain lashed against the high, arched windows of the Department of Mysteries, drumming a hollow rhythm against the enchanted glass that refused to blur. The air inside the Hall of Prophecies was frigid, thick with the scent of old magic and dust long undisturbed. Until now, a single sphere, suspended in the center of a newly revealed alcove, pulsed faintly, its glass surface still clouded, still incomplete. It had been blank when they first found it. Now, with each discovery, each clue unearthed, it wrote itself. Harry stood with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the sphere, his reflection warped slightly in its curved surface, like a face seen through rippling water. He could feel the hum of it in his teeth, a low vibration that had started the moment they returned from Glastonbury tour. There, beneath the crumbling stones of an ancient watchtower, they had found the first sigil carved into the bedrock, a spiral within a triangle, glowing faintly at dawn. Hermione had translated it in hushed tones by wandlight. "Star. The door opens not with key, but with memory." "Star." She was beside him now, her fingers absently tracing the spine of a leather-bound journal. Her coat was damp at the shoulders, her hair pulled back in a loose braid that had begun to unravel. "It's responding to us," she said, voice quiet but steady, "not just to the locations. To star us, star our presence, our choices." That sigil wasn't just a marker, it was a test. Harry turned to look at her. "You think it's sentient?" "Not sentient," she corrected, "but attuned, like a spell keyed to bloodlines or bonds." She hesitated, then added, "It knew we were coming before we did." A silence settled between them, fragile and charged. They hadn't spoken of the look they'd exchanged when the sigil lit beneath their joined hands, nor of the warmth that had spread through their fingertips, like recognition. Then, movement in the sphere. A new line of script began to form, slow and deliberate, as though written by an invisible quill. Glowing silver letters curled across the glass, brighter than the others. Hermione stepped forward, breath-catching. "It's happening again." Harry moved beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. The words etched themselves one by one. "Star. Where the stag drank and the vale wept, the second key lies buried in psalm and debt. Seek the hall beneath the hill, where oaths were kept and time stood still. Star." The last letter faded into brilliance, then dimmed to a soft, steady glow. The sphere now held 4 lines, 2 from their discovery at Stonehenge, 1 from the Isle of Iona. And now this. Harry exhaled. "The stag. That's my patroness, and the veil is the one in the death chamber," Hermione finished. "But where the stag drank, that's not literal, is it? It's symbolic, a place tied to your magic, to your past." He ran a hand through his hair. "There's a spring near Godric's Hollow. I saw it once when I was a kid. An old stone basin, half covered in ivy. My mum used to say I drank from it the first time I apparated. Accidentally, of course." Hermione's eyes lit with realization. "And the hall beneath the hill, there are records of a hidden chamber under the hollow, part of an older settlement, pre-Hogwarts, suppressed during the purges." Harry looked at her. "You're saying the next clue is at my parents' home?" She met his gaze. "I think it's been waiting for you." A beat passed. The sphere pulsed once, gently, as if in agreement. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Somewhere in the ministry's depths, an alarm chimed, faint, distant. Someone had noticed the breach in the hall's wards. Hermione snapped her journal shut. We should go before they walk the place down. Harry nodded, but didn't move right away. He stared at the sphere, at the words that had formed not from the past, but from something unfolding now, something alive. "We're not just reading a prophecy," he said quietly. "We're writing it." Hermione's hand brushed his just for a moment. "Then we'd better get the next line right." The wind howled through the cracked arches of the old observatory, perched atop the Carpathian ridge, carrying with it the scent of damp stone in distant storms. Moonlight, thin and fractured by the shifting clouds, spilled across the cracked marble floor where Harry crouched behind a crumbling column, his breath shallow. Beside him, Hermione gripped her wand tightly, her eyes scanning the shadows that writhed between the broken instruments, bronze astrolabes half buried in ivy, telescopes with shattered lenses like dead eyes. "They're close," she whispered. "I felt the wards give way 10 minutes ago." Harry nodded, not taking his eyes off the spiral staircase that wound down into the lower chambers. The seventh door's prophecy had led them here, to this forgotten place where the stars had once been charted by a secret order known only as the Astral Keepers. The words that had formed in the blank sphere, star, where the sky remembers, the key turns twice beneath the fallen eye star, had pointed unmistakably to this ruin, a flicker of movement near the doorway. A shadow, too sharp, too deliberate. Harry raised his wand. Expulso. The spell tore through the air, striking the stone lintel, just as a figure lunged forward. The explosion sent shards of rock flying, and a man in dark robes was thrown backward, crashing into the remnants of a star chart carved into the wall. 2 more on the left. Hermione called, already moving. "Stupefy." Her spell arced true, but the second figure deflected it with a flick of his wand, shouting in a guttural tongue Harry didn't recognize. A third emerged from behind a collapsed dome, his robes emblazoned with a silver sigil, a serpent coiled around a broken key. "The serpent's key," Hermione muttered, her voice tight. "I thought they were just rumors." "They're not," Harry said, pushing to his feet. "And they don't want us reading that prophecy." Another curse slashed through the air, scorching the floor between them. Harry rolled, came up fast, and fired off a binding hex. The man dodged, but Hermione was ready. She cast a complex tripartite jinx that tangled his legs in shimmering ropes of light. He fell hard, cursing. But the third was faster. He lunged for the center of the chamber, where a circular dais bore the remnants of a celestial map etched in tarnished silver. On it, a single stone, obsidian, veined with light, pulsed faintly. "Thereafter the lens," Hermione realized aloud. "The fallen eye. It's not a metaphor. It's here." Harry sprinted forward, but the remaining attacker reached the dais first. He raised his wand, chanting in a low resonant tone. The stone began to glow, the veins spreading like cracks in ice. "No you don't," Harry growled. He slammed into the man with a shoulder charge, knocking him sideways. They crashed to the floor, wands skittering away. The man was strong, stronger than he looked, and he drove an elbow into Harry's ribs. Aim flared, but Harry twisted, pinning the man's arm and driving a fist into his jaw. Above them, Hermione was dueling the second attacker with furious precision. Blue and crimson light flashed across the vaulted ceiling, casting their struggle in strobing relief. A hex grazed her shoulder, and she gasped, but didn't falter. "Finite incantatum," she cried, and the man's wand sparked and went dark. Harry scrambled back to the dais, retrieving his wand. The obsidian stone still pulsed, but the light was fading. He picked it up. It was cold, unnaturally so, and tucked it into his coat. "We need to go," he said, breathing hard. Hermione nodded, retrieving her bag. "They'll be back. And next time they might not come alone." They moved quickly down the spiral stairs, the wind screaming behind them like a wounded thing. As they stepped into the moonlit clearing below, Harry glanced back once. The observatory stood silent once more, its secrets bleeding into the night. But he could feel the weight of the stone in his pocket, and the weight of the eyes now watching them from the dark. The train rocked gently over the alpine tracks, snow-dusted geeks, rising like jagged teeth against a pale sky. Ice feathered the edges of the window, catching the light in crystalline shards as the compartment hummed with the soft rhythm of motion. Harry sat across from Hermione, his reflection ghostly in the glass, half merged with the mountains beyond. She had her knees drawn up, a book open but unread at her lap, her fingers tapping once, twice, against the worn cover of Star, the hidden archives of the Merovingian Circle Star, as is weighing whether to speak. Outside, a hawk circled above the pines, wings outstretched and still against the wind. Harry watched it until it vanished behind a ridge. "Do you ever think about how strange it is," he said, voice low, "that something like that door, something hidden for centuries, would wait for us? Not Dumbledore, not McGonagall, just us." Hermione turned her head slowly, her eyes soft with something he couldn't name. "It didn't wait for us, Harry. It waited for the right moment, and maybe for the right people to be ready." He looked down at his hands. Scars mapped them now, lines from battles, yes, but also from rebuilding. "I don't feel ready." "You don't have to feel ready," she said, and there was a quiet strength in her voice, the kind that had carried them through darker nights than this. "You just have to keep going. That's always been enough." A silence settled, but it wasn't empty. It carried the weight of years, of arguments fought, of silences endured, of glances exchanged in corridors and battlefields, where words were too dangerous or too fragile to speak. The warmth of the compartment wrapped around them, a fragile pocket of peace in a journey that had grown heavier with every mile. Then, unexpectedly, Hermione laughed, a soft, sudden sound like wind chimes. "Do you remember when we tried to apparate to Stonehenge and ended up in a sheep pen?" Harry grinned. "You blamed me for mispronouncing the coordinates." "Because you did," I said. "Wiltshire. How was I supposed to know it was Wiltshire?" She shook her head, smiling. "You looked so offended when that ram charged you." "I was wearing my best robes, and they smelled like lanolin for weeks." She tucked a loose curl behind her ear, her expression lingering in the warmth of the memory. Then quieter, she said, "We've come a long way since then." Harry met her gaze. The train passed into a tunnel, and for a moment they were in darkness. The only light, the faint glow of the overhead charm, flickering like a candle. In that dimness, he saw the truth he'd spent years avoiding, the way her presence steadied him, not like a spell or a shield, but like gravity, like home. When the light returned, so did the distance. Just a little. She looked away first, fingers returning to the book. "I think the next clue is in the ruins near Lucerne," she said, voice professional again, but with a tremor beneath. "There's a fresco in the old library, supposedly painted by a member of the Ordo Septimus. It shows 7 stars, but one is veiled." "Like the door," Harry murmured. "Like the door," she exhaled. "I keep wondering, what if the prophecy isn't about saving the world? What if it's about changing it? Not with war, but with truth." He thought of the blank sphere, the way words had bloomed like ink in water when they stood before it, words they still couldn't fully decipher. They would have to decide what kind of truth we're willing to live with. Hermione's eyes held his again. No smile now, no book. Just the quiet hum of the train, the mountains watching, and the unspoken thing between them, brighter than any spell, heavier than any prophecy. The air beneath Montes Arcanum was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient parchment, a silence so profound it pressed against Harry's eardrums like a physical weight. Torchlight flickered across the curved walls of the descending tunnel, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed reluctant to move. Hermione led the way, her wand held aloft, the tip pulsing with a soft, steady blue light that reflected in the condensation-slick stones. Every step echoed too loudly in the stillness, as though the earth itself were listening. "This is it," she whispered, her voice barely above breath. "The records mention a sublevel beneath the old library, a vault sealed during the schism of 438. They called it the Scriptorium of Forgotten Voices." Harry frowned, wiping a hand across his forehead. "Forgotten for a reason?" She hesitated, or silenced. At the tunnel's end stood a circular door made of black iron, etched with rose that pulsed faintly when Hermione's light touched them. They shimmered like dying embers, old magic, worn but not broken. She traced a symbol with her fingertip, murmuring an incantation in a dialect Harry didn't recognize. The runes flared once, then dimmed. With a low groan, the door swung inward, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Harry stepped inside first, instinctively reaching for his wand. The room was a cathedral of memory, rows upon rows of stone shelves stretched into the gloom, each lined with scrolls and leather-bound codices, their spines cracked and peeling. But something was wrong. The books were unmarked, no titles, no authorship. And when Harry pulled one free and opened it, the pages were blank. Not blank, Hermione corrected, peering over his shoulder. Erased. Look, the fibers of the parchment still hold residue. Someone used a reversal charm, not just to hide the text, but to unwrite it. She reached for another volume, then another. All the same, empty. And yet, as she moved deeper into the vault, a faint hum began to rise. Not from her, not from Harry, but from the air itself. A vibration, low and mournful, like a song, half remembered. Then she found the pedestal. At the center of the chamber stood a raised dais of white marble, cracked with age. Upon it rested a single scroll, bound in silver thread, and sealed with a wax sigil, shaped like an eye with a closed lid. Hermione approached slowly, as if afraid to disturb the silence. But when she reached for it, the hum sharpened, a single clear tone that made Harry's teeth ache. "Don't," he said, though he wasn't sure why, but she unbound the scroll. The moment the thread fell away, the air above the pedestal shimmered. Words began to form, not on the parchment, but in mid-air, glowing faintly blue, written in a script that twisted like smoke. They were in no language Harry knew, but Hermione gasped. "It's archaic seer's tongue," she whispered. It's listing names. Hundreds of them. No, thousands, all of them, crossed out." Harry stepped closer. "Who are they?" "The ones who saw," she said, her voice trembling. "The ones who spoke truths that were never meant to be heard. These were prophecies, real ones, suppressed. Not because they were false, because they were true." A cold knot formed in Harry's stomach. "By who?" "The Concilium," she said. "An old council, pre-wizarding war, even pre-goblin rebellions. They believed some truths were too dangerous to exist, so they built this place. And they erased every record, every voice, every future that threatened the balance. Above them, the glowing names began to fade, one by one, as if being unmade all over again. And then, from the darkness beyond the shelves, a single phrase appeared, fresh, burning silver. "Star, the seventh door, remembers what you forgot." "Star?" Hermione staggered back. "Harry, I think we're not just following a prophecy. I think we're inside it." Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the stained glass windows of the Bodleian's restricted annex, each droplet distorting the faint luminescence of the enchanted candles that hovered near the ceiling. Hermione's fingers trembled slightly as she turned another brittle page in the manuscript before her, a vellum-bound codex written in a cipher that had taken her 3 sleepless nights to crack. The ink was faded, the script angular and archaic, but the meaning now cut through the centuries like a blade. "They didn't just misplace star the prophecies," she whispered, more to herself than to Harry, who stood just behind her, arms crossed, eyes scanning the shadows between the towering shelves. "They erased them, on purpose." Harry stepped closer, his boots barely making a sound on the stone floor. "Who did?" She pointed to a passage, her finger hovering just above the page as if afraid to touch it. "The oracles of Viridian. They were real, Harry, not myths. The sect of seers, older than the ministry, older than Hogwarts, tasked with safeguarding certain truths or burying them." He leaned in, reading the translated text. "Star, when the seventh gate wakes, the name shall return, and the world will remember what it chose to forget." "Star. That's the same phrase from the door," he said. Hermione nodded. "And look here, this wasn't just about hiding the prophecy. They didn't want anyone to even know it existed. They severed the lineage of guardians, destroyed the records, cursed the sites where the visions were recorded. Entire libraries in Gaul, in Eire, in the Highlands, burned or collapsed under accidents." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with realization. They weren't protecting the world from the prophecy. They were protecting the prophecy from the world. A silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft creak of ancient wood settling. Harry moved to the window, peering out into the rain-washed Oxford courtyard below. So why now? Why does the sphere right itself when we're near it? Because the seal is breaking, she said, flipping to a diagram in the margin. A 7-pointed star with 1 point veiled in ink. The oracles didn't destroy the 7th door. They star-sealed star it, using blood and memory. And blood calls to blood. The spell, it recognizes us. He turned sharply. Us? You mean? I mean our names, she said quietly. Not just Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. Our true names. The ones given before birth. The ones whispered in the ear of the first seer at Stone Hollow. She paused, swallowing. They're in the prophecy, but they're written in the old tongue. Names that haven't been spoken in over 1,000 years. Harry exhaled, running a hand through his hair. And someone else knows this too. She didn't need to ask what he meant. The shattered wards at the Isle of Dreer. The fire at the Prague Archive. Someone had been one step behind them, or perhaps ahead, erasing traces. They're not just hunting the prophecy, she murmured. They're hunting the star memory star of us. A gust of wind rattled the window pane. One of the hovering candles flickered and died. Hermione reached for a smaller text tucked beside her notes, a ledger of disappearances from the 10th century. Look, she said, her voice tight. Every 73 years, 7 scholars vanish without trace. Mages, historians, seers, all studying forgotten prophecies, all last seen near standing stones or old archways. Harry leaned over the book. And the last group? Vanished in 1949, she said. Just after Grindelwald fell. Just before your parents were born. The words hung in the air like smoke. He looked at her, really looked. Her frayed sleeves, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her thumb absently traced the edge of her wand as if drawing strength from it. We're not the first to follow this path, he said. No, she whispered. But we might be the first who were star called star, which ston. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing the cobbles clean, as if the world itself were trying to forget. But some names, once spoken, refused to stay buried. The air beneath Stonehenge was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone, the residual magic of the site humming like a plucked wire against Harry's skin. Torches flickered erratically along the tunnel's curved walls, casting long, dancing shadows that made every alcove seem to shift with hidden movement. Hermione's wand was raised, tip glowing a steady blue, her breath shallow but controlled as she traced the runic pattern on the chamber floor with her eyes. It's a ward sequence, she whispered. But it's not just protection, it's a key. We have to activate it in the right order. Or it brings the whole thing down on our heads, Harry finished, scanning the tunnel behind them. His scar prickled, not with pain, but with that familiar low-grade warning. Something was wrong. The silence was too complete. Even the distant drip of water had stopped. A stone shifted underfoot. He turned just as a jet of crimson light tore through the dark, missing his head by inches and cracking the ancient wall behind him. Down, he shouted, tackling Hermione to the ground, as 2 more curses screamed overhead, splintering the air with their speed. Figures emerged from the shadows, robed, masked, their movements precise and coordinated. 5 of them, spreading out in a semicircle, wands raised. Leave now, Harry said, rolling to his feet and pulling Hermione up beside him. This isn't yours. One of the figures tilted their head, voice distorted by magic. The 7th door belongs to those strong enough to claim it. You're just caretakers. Hermione's fingers tightened around her wand. We're trying to understand it, not exploit it. Another curse came, this one a sickly green, aimed low. Harry deflected it with a sharp flick of star protego star, the shield flaring like molten glass. The force of it knocked him back a step, but he held. Then you're on the wrong side. They moved as one. Hermione spun, shouting stall. Expulso, star at the ceiling above the attackers. Rock shattered, dust and rubble crashing down, forcing 2 of them to retreat. One dodged too slowly. A sickening crack echoed through the chamber. Harry didn't wait. Star, stupefy star. Bright red light streaked across the space, but the target vanished behind a shimmering barrier. Blood magic, Hermione breathed, eyes wide. They're using old wards, pre-Founders era. That's not just skill, they've been preparing. A curse grazed Harry's arm, searing through his sleeve. He hissed, clenching his jaw, and fired off a non-verbal star. Confringo star, the blast ripping through the tunnel, and sending one of the figures flying into the wall with a crunch. But more were coming. Hermione was already moving, chanting under her breath, her voice rising in a language Harry didn't recognize, syllables sharp and ancient. The runes on the floor began to glow, pulsing with amber light. The air thickened, pressing against their ears like deep water. "They're trying to steal the sequence," she shouted. "Don't let them near the circle." Two lunged forward. Harry intercepted one with a well-placed star, Petrificus totalis star. But the other slipped past, diving toward the center of the chamber. Hermione flicked her wand. Star, flagrate, star, and a whip of fire erupted from the tip, lashing out like a serpent. The attacker screamed as it caught his cloak, spinning and falling into the dirt. The remaining two exchanged a glance, then raised their wands together. The combined curse hit like a storm. A wave of dark energy surged forward, cracking the stone beneath their feet. Harry barely managed star, Protego Maxima, star before the force slammed into them, throwing both he and Hermione back against the wall. The shield flickered, strained. Hermione gasped, blood trickling from her nose. "We can't hold." "Then we ended," Harry said, gripping her hand for half a second, long enough to feel the warmth, the trust, before rising. He stepped forward, whined high, and cast the first spell that came to mind. Star, sonorous, star, then roared the incantation Hermione had taught him weeks ago, the one from the lost grimoire in Edinburgh. The ground trembled, the runes flared white, and the chamber fell silent, save for the sound of collapsing stone and the groan of something ancient, awakening. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the leaded glass of the Edinburgh archive, a soft percussion beneath the crackle of the enchanted sconces lighting the stone walls. Dust hung in the air, disturbed by decades of untouched shelves, each carved with runes that pulsed faintly when touched. Harry ran his fingers along a row of ancient tomes, their spines bound in what looked like dragonhide, their titles long faded into obscurity. "This has to be it," Hermione whispered, her voice hushed, as though afraid to wake something. She knelt beside a stone plinth in the center of the chamber, brushing grime from an inscription etched in Old Tongue. Star septum ostia, septum voces, una valida, una latens. Star, 7 doors, 7 voices, 1 erase, 1 hidden. Harry crouched beside her, his breath catching. The erase one, that's the 7th door. But why erase it? And by whom? She looked up, eyes alight with a mix of dread and exhilaration. "Not just erased, Harry. Suppressed. There's a difference. Erasure is destruction, suppression, that's containment. Someone didn't want it found. Not destroyed, just buried." He thought of the blank sphere, how it had remained inert, until the moment they stood before it. Then, like ink bleeding into water, the words had formed. Star, when the silent door speaks, the buried word shall rise. Star, no name, no date, just a riddle wrapped in silence. Hermione pulled a small leather-bound journal from her satchel, one they'd recovered from a sealed chamber beneath Durmstrang's ruins. "There's a mention here of a council before Hogwarts was even built. A gathering of seers, alchemists, and archmages, not just the founders, but others. A group called the Star Ordo Septimus Star. They believed prophecy wasn't just prediction, but a kind of memory. That time isn't linear to magic, not truly, that some truths exist outside of it, waiting to be remembered." Harry frowned. "So this prophecy, it's not about the future. It's about something that should have happened, but was undone. Or something that did happen, but was forgotten," she corrected, turning a brittle page. "They called it the star verbum perditum star, the lost word. Not a spell, not a name, but a truth so powerful, so dangerous, that speaking it could unravel enchantments older than wizard kind. The founders, well, not all of them agreed on what to do with it, and one of them silenced it." She nodded. "Rowena, according to this, she argued for preservation. Salazar wanted it destroyed. Godric, he proposed sealing it behind a door that could only be opened when the right 2 voices spoke to it." Her voice softened, voices not of blood or power, but of choice, of balance. Harry's pulse quickened. And the door, it reacted to us. Not just us, she said quietly. Us star together, star. The alignment, emotional, magical, it had to be precise. That's why it stayed blank for centuries. The right pair had to stand before it. He looked at her then, really looked. The lamplight caught the gold in her hair, the tired lines beneath her eyes, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the page. How many nights had they sat like this? How many dangers faced? How many words left unsaid? "Do you think," he began, hesitant, "that we were meant to find it?" Hermione didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the satchel again and pulled out a small, tarnished mirror, one they'd found beneath the ruins of an old monastery in the Hebrides. Its surface was cracked, but when she whispered a charm, a ghostly image flickered within. A great hall, 7 arched doorways, one of them veiled in black flame. "This was taken before the war," she said, "before everything changed. The mirror shows what was, but also what could be again. And this," she pointed to the darkened door, "this wasn't in the ministry. Not originally. It was star-moved star. Hidden during the schism, after the Ordo Septimus fell." Harry exhaled slowly. "Then we're not just chasing a prophecy, we're chasing history. And someone," she added, her voice low, "doesn't want us to finish the sentence." Rain tapped a slow, uneven rhythm against the window pane, the kind of drizzle that clung to the air and made the stones of the old inn breathe dampness. Harry sat by the fire, the glow of embers, painting shadows beneath his eyes. He turned the prophecy sphere over in his hands, still blank, still silent, its glass surface cool and unyielding. It had been 3 days since the words had vanished after appearing briefly in the Department of Mysteries, as though the magic had exhaled, and then drawn back. He could sylvie them, though, star. "When the blood remembers the vow, the 7th door shall open." Star. Hermione stood at the edge of the room, unpacking her satchel with careful precision. She slid a book free, Star, the Covenants of the Elder Vale, star, and set it on the small wooden table. Her fingers lingered on the cover, as if bracing for what lay within. "You should rest," Harry said without looking up. "You've been at it since dawn." "I'm fine," she replied, but her voice carried the faintest tremor of exhaustion. "Besides, we're running out of time. The more we delay, the more likely someone else finds the next clue." He finally glanced at her. The firelight caught the gold in her hair, the faint smudge of ink on her wrist. Something caught in his chest, something old, something familiar. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." A log cracked in the hearth, sending up a flurry of sparks. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the shutters. The inn was quiet, too quiet. No other guests, no laughter from the common room below. Just the two of them, and the weight of everything unsaid. Harry set the sphere down. "Do you remember that night in the tent, when we were hunting the Horcruxes?" Hermione stilled. Then she turned. "Of course I do. You were reading Star Hogwarts. A history star by Wandlight. Same way you are now." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Some habits don't die. I used to watch you," he admitted, voice low. "When you thought I was asleep, you'd bite your lip when you found something important, tap your fingers when you were thinking. I memorized it all." She didn't answer at first. Instead, she walked to the hearth and sat across from him, tucking her legs beneath her. "I used to think you didn't notice. Not notice, star, you star." He let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. "Hermione, you were the only thing that kept me grounded." She looked down. "I was scared, all the time. Not of dying, but of failing you. You never did." Another silence, longer this time. The kind that stretched not from absence, but from fullness. Too much to say. Too little courage to say it. Then she whispered, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened, if the war had ended differently?" He studied her. "What do you mean?" "If we hadn't gone back to Hogwarts, if we'd just disappeared, somewhere small. A cottage by the sea. No prophecies. No responsibilities." Harry's throat tightened. "I thought about it, every day." Her eyes met his. "Why didn't we?" "Because we're us," he said softly, "and we don't get happy endings that easy." She reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the prophecy sphere. Maybe this time, it's not about fate. Maybe it's about choice. He covered her hand with his, warm, steady, real. Outside, the rain softened. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed midnight. Rain tapped a slow rhythm against the high windows of the Hogwarts library, a steady hush that filled the empty aisles like breath. The air smelled of old parchment, beeswax, and the faintest trace of lavender. Hermione always thought the castle remembered her. She stood at the edge of the restricted section, fingers tracing the spine of a crumbling tome on forgotten wards, while Harry leaned against a marble pillar, his eyes scanning the ceiling where golden constellations shimmered in slow rotation. It said, "Beneath silence, the first truth lies waiting," Hermione murmured, clutching the parchment they'd pieced together from the ruins of the Isle of Skye. And the next symbol, it matches the old Ravenclaw crest, but inverted. That has to mean something. Harry stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. "You think it's here? Under the library?" "I think it's under star. Something star, more and more," she said, kneeling to examine the stone floor. "Look, these tiles, they're newer than the rest. Than this one." She pressed her palm flat against a slab near the base of the ladder that led to the highest shelves. A faint warmth pulsed beneath her touch. "There's magic here. Old magic. Subtle." Harry crouched beside her. "Can you open it?" She hesitated, not without the right trigger. "It's warded, probably blood-linked or intent-based, but the clue mentioned silence, and the first truth." Her eyes flicked to the restricted section. What if it's not about noise? What if it's about Star Voice's star? The first truth. The first student to speak in a library after its founding. Harry raised an eyebrow. "You're going to need a better lead than that." She stood, brushing dust from her robes. "Or maybe it's simpler. The Founder's magic was always about intent. What if silence means truth, spoken without fear?" She took a breath, placed both hands on the stone, and said clearly, "I was afraid to come back here." The moment the words left her lips, the floor shimmered. A soft blue light threaded through the cracks, spreading like veins of starlight. The tile sank slightly, then slid aside with a sound like a sigh, revealing a narrow stone staircase spiraling into darkness. Harry stared. That actually worked. Hermione gave a small, breathless laugh. Honesty was always more powerful than spells. "You of all people should know that." He looked at her, really looked. Her hair catching the dim glow, her eyes alight with quiet triumph, and something tightened in his chest. He nodded, drawing his wand. "After you," she descended first, wand raised, light blooming at its tip, like a captured firefly. The stairs were ancient, worn smooth by centuries of unseen feet, and the air grew cooler, the deeper they went. The walls were lined with carvings, symbols they didn't recognize, looping scripts that shifted when stared at too long. At the bottom, a small chamber opened before them. In its center stood a pedestal, and on it, a single object, a bronze key shaped like an open book. Hermione approached slowly. "This isn't just a key," she whispered. "It's a memory vessel. I've read about these, used by the early Order of the Silver Quill. They stored truths in them. Not facts, but star-knowing star." Harry stepped closer. "And the seventh door?" She reached out, then paused. "Whatever this shows us, it might change everything. The prophecy wasn't just star about star us, Harry. It was star for star us. And it's still writing itself." He met her gaze. "Then let's see what it says." She touched the key. Light erupted, not blinding, but deep and golden, pouring from the key and spiraling upward in ribbons. Words formed in the air, not in English, but in something older, something they felt star before they understood. And then, a voice, not aloud, but in their minds, soft and ancient. "Star, when love speaks in silence, the door will open. When two hearts remember what the world has forgotten, the past will rise again." "Star." The light faded. Hermione turned to him, her breath unsteady. "Harry." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth hung between them, heavier than spells, older than prophecy. The air in the hidden chamber was thick with the scent of old stone and something sharper, ozone, like the moment before a storm breaks. Harry's wand trembled in his hand, its tip casting a narrow beam that danced across ancient runes carved deep into the walls. They pulsed faintly, reacting to his presence, to star her star presence. Hermione stood beside him, her breath shallow, fingers tracing the edge of a circular seal embedded in the floor. It was massive, 12 feet across, and etched with interlocking symbols that shimmered faintly in the dim light. This shouldn't exist," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "It's older than Hogwarts, older than the Ministry. This is Founder-level magic. No, star before star, the Founders. This is their star work." Harry frowned. "Whose?" She looked up, her eyes wide with the reflection of the seal's glow. "The ones who came before. The ones who shaped the first laws of magic." Salazar spoke of them in his private journals. Fragments, really. The council that bound magic to intent, that wove the very rules we live by. They vanished, or were buried. And this, she pressed her palm flat against the center of the seal, this is a key. A low hum filled the chamber, the runes flared, and the seal began to rotate, slowly, as if awakening from a long sleep. Dust rained from the ceiling. Harry stepped back, raising his wand, but Hermione didn't move. Her lips moved silently, translating the shifting script. "It's a test," she said, "a loyalty trial. It wants blood and oath, Founder's blood. But not just any. It wants Star Unity Star. Slytherin, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, all 4. Harry exhaled. "We don't have that." "No," she agreed, "but the seal recognizes something else. It responded when we touched it together. When star, you star, and star, I star." She hesitated, then met his gaze. "It's not about blood, it's about balance. The prophecy. It's not just star about star us. She star of star us, our star us. Our bond." He felt the words settle in his chest like a stone. They had danced around this for years, since the war, since the silence that followed, since the quiet dinners and shared glances that said more than words ever could. Now, in this buried room beneath the ruins of an old monastery in the Scottish Highlands, it rose between them like a living thing. The seal split open with a sound like cracking ice. A column of light shot upward, and within it a single object materialized, an obsidian disk no larger than a palm, inscribed with a spiral of silver glyphs. Hermione reached for it, but the moment her fingers brushed the surface, the glyphs ignited. "Star, by bond unbroken and truth unspoken, star." A voice echoed deep and resonant, not from the disk, but from the walls, the air, their bones. "Star, 7th law shall be remade. Seek the weaver, find the thread, or all magic will unravel." Star. Harry's scar prickled, not with pain, but with recognition. Not Voldemort. Something older. Something deeper. Hermione turned the disc over in her hands. "The 7th law. I've never seen it mentioned in any text, but if the first 6 are things like no killing curse shall bind the soul, or intent must govern transfiguration, then this is the foundation, the one that holds the rest together." "And someone wants to change it," Harry said. She nodded. "Or someone star needs star to. And the door, it didn't show the prophecy until we stood together. Maybe it was waiting for star. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins. A shadow flickered at the edge of the corridor, too tall, too still to be one of their team. Harry turned, wand raised, but the figure was gone. "They're coming," he said quietly. Hermione slipped the disc into a protective charm pouch and looked at him. "Then we don't stop, not now, not ever." And for the first time in years she took his hand. Warm, certain, unafraid, and the seal beneath their feet pulsed once, like a heartbeat waking. Rain lashed against the ministry's enchanted windows, like impatient fingers tapping glass. Harry stood in the dim corridor, just beyond the Hall of Prophecies, wand clenched in his hand, breath shallow. The air hummed with tension, a low electric thrum that made the hairs on his arms rise. He could feel the shift in the wards, like threads snapping one by one. "They're inside," Hermione whispered, her voice tight. She pressed a hand against the cold stone wall, eyes closed, lips moving silently, as she traced the residual magic. The eastern barrier just fell. They used a blood key, someone with high-level clearance. Harry's jaw tightened. Selwyn. It had to be him. She opened her eyes, dark with worry. He wouldn't risk this, unless he knew something we don't. The prophecy. It's not just a secret anymore, Harry. It's a weapon. A distant explosion echoed through the marble halls, followed by the sharp crack of splinching. Apparition inside the ministry. That shouldn't have been possible. They've breached the anti-apparition wards, Harry said, already moving. We need to get to the hall before they do. They ran, boots slapping against the stone, the flickering torchlight casting long, jagged shadows. Around them, the ministry groaned under invisible strain, enchanted tapestries peeled from the walls, portraits shrieking warnings in forgotten tongues. A suit of armor collapsed as they passed, its head rolling into a dark alcove. Hermione skidded to a halt at the entrance of the hall, eyes scanning the row of towering shelves. The seventh door, ancient, iron-bound, half-hidden behind a curtain of ivy that hadn't been there yesterday, stood ajar. The blank sphere within pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat beneath glass. "It's still here," she breathed. But the relief was short-lived. A curse sizzled past them, scorching the wall. Harry spun, raising his wand. 3 figures in charcoal gray cloaks advanced, hoods drawn, wands alight with violet fire. "Stand aside, Potter," one of them hissed. "The prophecy belongs to the Veilborn. It was never meant for the living to interpret." "The Veilborn?" Hermione stepped forward, voice sharp with disbelief. "You're not scholars, you're fanatics. That order was disbanded centuries ago. For good reason. They silenced us," the lead figure snarled. "They buried the truth behind lies and fear. But the door has opened, the words are being written, and we will claim what is ours." Harry didn't wait, stupefy. The red bolt shot forward, but the figure twisted, too fast, and the spell shattered a shelf behind them, sent prophecy orbs crashing like frozen tears. Glass burst, voices whispering fragments of forgotten futures, swirling in a storm of echoes. Hermione flicked her wand in a complex arc. The Tego Maxima, now. A shimmering dome erupted around them just as a barrage of hexes slammed into it, curses that twisted the air, warping light and sound. One grazed the shield and the stone beneath them blackened, crumbling into ash. "They're using forbidden ruse," she muttered, fingers trembling. "This isn't just magic, it's blood magic. They're sacrificing something to break through." Another explosion rocked the hall. The shelves trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. "We can't hold this forever," Harry said, scanning the room. "We need to move the sphere." "It's not just an object," she said, eyes locked on the pulsing orb. "It's tied to us, to the words appearing now. If they take it, they'll control the narrative. They'll twist the future." A crack split the air. The shield flickered. One of the attackers screamed, not in triumph but pain, and collapsed, his cloak burning from within, as if consumed by fire only he could feel. Hermione gasped. "The prophecy's rejecting him. It knows he's not meant to touch it." Harry's pulse roared in his ears. "Then we use that." He lunged forward, shattering the shield, and sprinted for the door. Curses whizzed past, searing his sleeve, but he didn't stop. He reached the sphere, fingers closing around the glass. It burned, not with heat, with memory. Images flashed behind his eyes, ruins beneath the sea, a woman with silver hair chanting in a language older than time, stars rearranging in the sky, and a voice, soft but absolute, "Star. Only the witnesses may bear the truth. Star." Hermione grabbed his arm. "Harry, we have to go, now." He nodded, clutching the sphere to his chest. Behind them, the hall began to collapse, not from magic, but from something deeper. The door groaned, its iron veins glowing, sealing itself shut. They ran, as the world behind them fell into shadow. The air in the Hall of Prophecies still hummed with residual magic, a low, almost imperceptible thrum beneath the silence. Harry stood with his back against the cool obsidian pillar, eyes fixed on the empty stand where the seventh sphere had rested only hours before. It was gone, not shattered, not misplaced, gone. The theft had been clean, precise, too precise for mere thieves. The protective enchantments, layered by centuries of unspeakables and reinforced just 2 nights ago by Hermione's own hand, had been bypassed without a single alarm. They knew exactly what they were doing, Hermione whispered, crouched beside the dais, fingertips brushing the scorched edge of the activation rune carved into the stone. Her voice was steady, but Harry heard the tremor beneath it, the same fear that curled in his own chest. This isn't random. This was planned long before we even found the door. Harry stepped forward, boots echoing in the cavernous hall. Who knew? Only the head of magical law enforcement, the minister, and us, she finished, rising slowly. Her robes were smudged with ash, her hair escaping its loose braid in wild tendrils. And 3 members of the Historical Mysteries Board, but none of them could have penetrated the final ward. That required blood-touched intent, someone who'd stood before the sphere, who'd seen the words form. Harry swallowed. The memory of those glowing letters still burned behind his eyes. Star. When the 7th gate opens, the first promise returns. Star. Then nothing. Just silence, and the slow fade of light. They'd returned at dawn to find the sphere gone, and the rune burned out. They'll try to read it, he said. Whoever took it, they'll want to know what it said. What its star will star say? Hermione turned to him, her gaze sharp, unless they already know. What if they didn't steal it to learn the prophecy, but to fulfill it? A cold weight settled in Harry's stomach. He remembered the legends, whispers of the oracles of ether, an ancient order said to have woven fate into the fabric of the world, their voices lost after the fall of Avalon. The clues they'd found in the ruins beneath Glastonbury Tor, the cipher in the margins of a 12th-century grimoire, recovered from the ruins of Mont Saint-Michel. Each piece had pointed toward a sealed truth, a prophecy never meant to be spoken. We need to find them before they activate it, Harry said. Where would they go? Somewhere with enough raw magic to force a reading. Hermione closed her eyes, thinking. Not the Ministry, too many eyes, not Hogwarts. The wards would resist an unsanctioned ritual. But there are older places, places where the veil is thin. Her eyes snapped open, the standing stones of Callan. In the Highlands, they're aligned with ley lines. If they're trying to amplify the sphere's magic, they'll need a conduit, Harry finished. A focus. Blood, memory, something tied to the original order, she nodded. And if they've been watching us, they know Star. We're Star the conduits. A gust of wind rushed through the hall, extinguishing 2 of the floating orbs above. Shadows stretched, long and hungry, across the floor. Harry drew his wand, pulse quickening. They'd left guards, aurors, unspeakables, but none had reported a breach, which meant the thieves had either silenced them or walked right through undetected. They used time magic, Hermione murmured, staring at the rune. Look at the burn pattern. It spirals backward. Someone stepped Star out. Star of sequence. A temporal bypass. Harry exhaled sharply. Time turners were destroyed. All of them. Not all, she said quietly. There were prototypes, older, unstable ones, used by the oracles, according to the texts. If someone recovered one, we're not just chasing thieves, Harry said. We're chasing ghosts. Hermione stepped close, her hand brushing his arm. Then we'll find them. Before they rewrite time itself. He met her eyes, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not just fear, not just urgency, but the quiet understanding of 2 people who had walked through fire together and were ready to do it again. Without another word, they turned and moved toward the archway, the darkness of the hall swallowing the space they left behind. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall on the Ministry's gilded dome. Somewhere, far to the north, a stone circle waited beneath a storm-laden sky. The gondola rocked gently beneath a bruised twilight sky, its oars slicing through water that shimmered with an unnatural luminescence. Harry gripped the lacquered edge, knuckles pale, as the gondolier, hooded and silent, steered them into a narrow canal so tight the moss-covered bricks scraped the boat's sides. Rain had begun to fall in soft, persistent sheets, blurring the golden glow of distant street lamps, and turning the city into a dream painted in silver and shadow. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Harry asked, turning to Hermione. She adjusted her satchel, fingers brushing the edge of the prophecy transcript they'd pieced together from the runes at Bathsheba's tower. According to the 3rd stanza of the Libris Aquilones, The archive lies where water remembers what stone forgets. The Venetians believed memory soaked into the lagoon. Their oldest wards were built beneath the tides. Harry frowned. "And we're trusting a book that hasn't been opened in 700 years? It opened for you," she reminded him quietly, "and then it burned itself to ash. I'd say that counts as a sign." He didn't answer. Since the door in the ministry had inscribed their names into the blank sphere, Harry James Potter and Hermione Jean Granger, bound by the seventh threshold, they'd been moving through a world that felt both ancient and newly awakened. Each clue they followed seemed to shift just out of reach, rewriting itself in forgotten tongues and half-ruined spells. The gondola slowed. The water ahead shimmered, not with reflection, but with something beneath, pulsing veins of blue light, threading through the canal floor like submerged roots. The gondolier stepped out, his boots sinking into water that suddenly held form. He gestured to a spot where the current swirled in a perfect spiral. "Down," he said, his voice, like gravel in water. Hermione took a breath and pulled her wand free. Protego amphibious. A shimmering bubble enveloped them, and she stepped over the side. Harry followed, the cold canal water pressing against his ears before the charm took hold. They sank. Below the surface, the city transformed. Crumbling pillars rose from the silt, wrapped in kelp and etched with runes that flickered like fireflies. Schools of silver fish darted through archways of coral and obsidian, their eyes too intelligent to be mere animals. And at the heart of it all, half buried beneath centuries of sediment, lay a domed structure of black marble, its entrance flanked by statues of robed figures, holding quills that dripped ink into the water. "The Aids Memoriae," Hermione whispered, her voice muffled by the charm. "The House of Remembering." They said it was myth. They swam closer. The doors were sealed with a lock shaped like an open book. Hermione reached into her satchel and pulled out the small brass key they'd found embedded in a stone in Glastonbury, shaped like a quill nib. She inserted it gently. The runes along the frame ignited. Words formed in the water between them, glowing with cold fire. "Star, only those who speak in silence may enter here. Only those who remember what they have not lived." "Star," Harry exhaled. "That's us. The prophecy chose us before we were born." Hermione nodded. She pressed her palm to the door, and Harry placed his over hers. Together, they thought of the blank sphere, of the weight of words not yet written, but already echoing through time. The doors groaned open. Inside, shelves spiraled into darkness, lined with scrolls that pulsed faintly, their ink shifting like living things. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a single volume bound in what looked like human skin. Hermione approached slowly. "This is it. The Chronophage Codex." Harry stepped beside her. "What does it say?" She opened it carefully. The first page was blank. Then slowly, letters began to form, written in no hand, by no quill. "Star. The seventh door does not foretell. It creates. Star." A chill passed through Harry's bones, and from somewhere deep in the archive a clock began to chime, though no clock had ever been built that could count the hours beneath the sea. The gondola rocked gently beneath them, a fragile sliver of wood cradled by the dark, whispering waters of the Venetian canal. Above, the stars were smudged by a thin veil of cloud, and the only light came from a single lantern swinging from the gondolier's prow, casting long, wavering shadows across the silent facades of centuries-old buildings. The air was cool, laced with salt, and the faint scent of damp stone, and the rhythmic creak of the oar dipping into water, was the only sound that dared break the quiet. Hermione sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them, her breath forming soft clouds in the night air. She stared not at the passing alleys or the ornate balconies above, but at the water where the lantern's glow flactured into trembling gold. Harry sat across from her, one hand resting on the edge of the boat, fingers trailing just above the surface. He didn't speak, neither had for nearly 20 minutes. Words felt too heavy now, too revealing. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "Do you remember the first time we saw the prophecy room?" He exhaled, slowly nodding. "Glass spheres, thousands of them, like stars in jars, and now one of them is writing itself." She said, "For us." "For us," he repeated, testing the weight of the phrase. His green eyes lifted to her face, catching the flicker of gold in her gaze. It's strange, isn't it? How something so old could be waiting. She turned her head, studying him. The faint scar along his temple, the way his hair still defied order. The quiet intensity that had deepened over the years, not faded. I used to think I could understand everything if I just read enough, researched enough. But this isn't in any book. It's not logic. It's not even magic as we know it. A feeling. He finished. She nodded. Like we're walking a path someone already walked. But they left the mapping riddles. The silence settled again, softer this time, like dust after a storm. The gondolier turned a corner without a word, guiding them into a narrower stretch of canal, where the buildings leaned closer, their reflections merging in the black water like ancient hands clasped in prayer. "I think," Harry began, voice low, "I've spent so long running from things, my name, my past, even my own choices, that I never stopped to ask what I actually wanted." Hermione's breath caught, just slightly. He looked at her then, fully, unflinchingly. "But lately, it's not the prophecy I think about most. It's not the order, or the ruins, or even what's coming. It's you, standing beside me, always." She swallowed, fingers tightening around her arms. "Harry." "No, let me say it," he said, holding up a hand, not in defense, but in quiet insistence. "I know we've never summed. We've never let ourselves. Too much was happening, too much at stake. But now, I don't want to pretend anymore, not with you." The lantern swayed. Water lapped against the hull. Somewhere, far off, a violin played, a single, aching note. "I love you, Hermione," he said, not dramatically, not with flourish, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had finally found solid ground after years of falling. "Not because of the prophecy, not because we're caught in some ancient story, but because you're the one who's always known me, even when I didn't." Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "You say that like it's simple. It's not," he admitted. "But it is true." She let her legs unfold, shifting forward until her head rested atop his on the edge of the gondola. Their fingers didn't intertwine, yet, but the warmth between them was undeniable. "I've loved you for years," she whispered, "in pieces, in silence, in every argument, every library night. Every time you looked at me like I was the only person who made sense." He turned his hand, palm up, inviting. She took it. And there, beneath a sky, half hidden by cloud, in a boat gliding through the bones of a forgotten city, they sat, hands clasped, hearts open, as the world, ancient, dangerous, unknowable, waited just beyond the next turn. Rain lashed against the cracked stained glass of the abandoned chapel in Glastonbury, each drop sounding like a whispered secret against the ancient stone. Hermione clutched the leather-bound manuscript to her chest, her fingers trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of what they'd just uncovered. The ink inside still shimmered faintly, as though written moments ago instead of nearly 900 years past. Harry stood by the broken altar, his one tip casting a soft blue glow over the moss-covered runes carved into the flagstones. "It's real," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "All of it. The order of the seventh verse wasn't a myth. They weren't preserving prophecies," Hermione said, her voice hushed, reverent. "They were guarding the silence between them, the moments when the future hasn't yet chosen its shape." She opened the manuscript again, tracing the final page with a careful finger. The script was elegant, archaic, Latin, mixed with a dialect even she'd needed hours to decipher. But the last verse, the one that had appeared only when she'd recited the incantation beneath the standing stones at Avebury, was now clear. Star, the door that reveals rather than opens. Star, star, the key that listens, not knocks. Star, star, when the seer becomes the seen. Star, star, and silence speaks through mortal locks. Star, star. 7 echoes, 1 true breath. Star, star. The end is written in the step before death. Star. Harry turned to her, rainwater dripping from the edge of his cloak. The door that reveals rather than opens. You think it's not about entering somewhere, but seeing something that was always there. Hermione exhaled slowly. "I think the Hall of Prophecies was never meant to store fate. It was meant to hide this. The moment when prophecy stops being a prediction and becomes a mirror. She looked up, her eyes bright with realization. The blank sphere wasn't empty, it was waiting. For us. A gust of wind tore through the chapel, extinguishing Harry's wandlight. In the sudden dark, the manuscript's final lines pulsed once. A soft gold light spreading from the page like ripples in water. Shadows danced across the walls, forming shapes, archways, corridors, the familiar columns of the Department of Mysteries, but distorted, as if reflected in a warped mirror. "Someone's coming," Harry said sharply, drawing his wand again. Hermione snapped the book shut, but the glow lingered beneath her fingers. Not just someone. The Viridian Circle. I saw their mark on the outer wall. 3 interlocking serpents. She tucked the manuscript into her coat. "They've been one step behind us since Prague. They want to destroy it." "And if they do?" Harry asked, stepping toward her. "Then we lose the only thing that might tell us what the 7th door star is star, not just where it is." She hesitated, then added, "Harry, what if we're not meant to stop what's coming? What if we're meant to become star it?" He looked at her then, really looked, her wind-tangled hair, the smudge of dirt on her cheek, the fierce intelligence in her eyes that had never dimmed, not even after all they'd survived. "You've been thinking about this for a long time," he said quietly. "Since the first time the sphere wrote itself when you touched it," she admitted. "It didn't react to me alone, or to you, but together." She didn't finish. Outside, the crunch of gravel under boots cut through the storm. Harry grabbed her hand. "Then let's make sure we're together when we find out what it means." They slipped through a side passage just as torchlight flared in the nave. The wind howled behind them, but beneath it, faint and echoing, came a sound neither could explain, a low, resonant hum like a door breathing. The wind howled through the jagged peaks like a chorus of forgotten spirits, biting through Harry's cloak as he pressed himself against the cold stone of the fortress wall. Snowflakes stung his face, swirling in erratic spirals beneath the bruised sky. Below, the valley was swallowed in mist, but above, higher, deeper into the mountains, torchlight flickered behind narrow arrow slits. They were close. Hermione crouched beside him, her breath forming ghostly clouds. Her fingers trembled, but not from the cold. In her palm, the shard of the prophecy sphere glowed faintly, pulsing like a slowing heartbeat. "It's here," she whispered. "The source. I can feel it, like a thread pulling through my bonds." Harry nodded, scanning the fortress. Ancient, even by magical standards, it had no name in modern records. Only in the fragments of the Order of the Seven Fail, a cult of seers and archivists erased from history, had they found mention of this place. A forge of forgotten magic. A crucible for remaking reality. "They'll try to activate it at moonrise," Hermione said. "The alignment? It's written in the runes at Glastonbury Tor. When the silver light strikes the inner sanctum, the door opens, not to fate, but to creation." He looked at her. Snow clung to her lashes, her hair wild beneath her hood. There was fear in her eyes, yes, but also fire. The same fire he'd seen in the Department of Mysteries, when the blank sphere had first etched their names in shimmering script. Star. He who has conquered death, and she who holds time's thread, shall bear witness to the unwritten. Star. They had run from ministry officials, fought off acolytes in Prague, deciphered star charts in a buried library beneath Mont Saint-Michel, all to stop this. And yet, part of him wondered if they were meant to fail. "We can't let them control it," he said, voice low. "The prophecy that writes itself in real time. If they twist it, then it won't just predict the future," she finished. "It will become it. No resistance, no choice, just their will, made law." A silence stretched between them, thin as ice. Then, without looking away, Hermione reached for his hand. Her fingers were numb, but her grip was sure. "Whatever happens in there, I need you to know. I've known for years, Harry. I just never let myself say it." He exhaled, his pulse loud in his ears. The wind dropped for a moment, as if the mountain itself was listening. "You don't have to say it," he murmured. "I felt it too, every time you looked at me after the war, every time we almost spoke and didn't." She smiled then, Small, sad, true. Well, maybe the end of the world is the best time to start. They moved together, silent and swift, scaling the lower ramparts with a blend of stealth and spellwork. Hermione disarmed the ward with a whispered countercharm, her wand tracing symbols only she could read. Harry stunned the sentry with a silent star, stupefy star, catching the man before he could fall, and alert the others. Inside, the air was thick with incense and old magic. The corridors narrowed, spiraling downward into the heart of the mountain. The walls were lined with carvings, figures with 7 eyes, doors floating in voids, stars collapsing into words, and beneath it all a hum. Not sound, but sensation, the world bending. At the center chamber, they froze. The 7th door stood upright on a dais of black marble, not wood or stone, but something older, like solidified shadow. Before it, hooded figures chanted in a language that made Harry's scar prickle. At their head, Lucien Varn, the rogue unspeakable, who had stolen the other prophecy shards, raised his arms. The full moon's light poured through a slit in the ceiling, striking the door. Cracks of silver light spiderwebbed across its surface. Hermione gasped. "It's starting." Harry drew his wand. "Then we stop it. Now." Rain lashed the cliffs of northern Scotland like whips of cold silver, carving rivulets down the ancient stone of the fortress perched atop the headland. Thunder growled low across the sea, not the roll of nature, but the deep pulse of ward magic straining under repeated assault. Harry crouched behind a shattered merlon, his breath fogging in the wind, wand gripped tight in a hand still scarred from past battles. Below, the hidden stronghold of the Order of the Pale Flame, long-thought myth, thrum with violet light, its outer wards flickering like dying embers. "They know we're here," Hermione whispered, pressing close beside him, her dark curls plastered to her temples. She tapped her own wand twice against her palm, once for danger, twice for delay. The wards adapted. They weren't supposed to recognize the incantation. Harry nodded, eyes scanning the shifting patterns in the air, crackling glyphs that pulsed in time with the fortress's heartbeat. "They've been waiting." "Or someone warned them." She hesitated. "It's possible. The prophecy's not just watching us. It might be star-shaping star them." He glanced at her then, really looked. Her face pale but resolute, the torchlight of spellfire catching the gold in her eyes. There was no time for the weight of that thought, no space for the ache he'd carried since their last argument in the ruins of Bathsheba's tower. "Not now. We go in hard and fast," he said. "If they rewrite the final sigil before we reach the inner sanctum, the door collapses. Forever." Hermione exhaled, pulling a small rune-etched compass from her coat. It spun wildly, then settled, its needle glowing a steady blue. 3rd corridor to the left after the gate. No more than 30 seconds once the wards fall. Harry raised his wand. On 3. A shared breath, then 2. Star. Now. Star. They surged forward as Neville's team, positioned on the eastern ridge, unleashed a coordinated barrage of Star, Diffindo Maxima Star, and Star Revelio, Inverso Star. The air split with a scream of unraveling magic. The violet shield cracked, then shattered like glass underwater. Harry dropped low, rolling through the breach, Hermione right behind, casting Star Protego Horribilis Star as cursed darts spat from the walls. Inside, the corridors twisted like living things, stone shifting beneath their feet. Hermione muttered countercharms under her breath, tracing invisible patterns in the air. "They've woven Star Mendatium Architecture Star. The layout changes based on intent. Think Star Retrieval Star, not Star Theft Star. It's not taking. It's the only way." Harry focused, picturing the blank sphere they'd seen in the ministry, the way it had written their names in silver flame. "Star, we're not taking it, we're returning it." Star, the walls groaned, hallway straightening before them. Ahead, a spiral staircase plunged into darkness. "They'll be guarding the vault," Harry said, voice low. "Of course," she replied, already pulling a small vial of liquid moonlight from her pouch. "But they won't expect Star. This Star," she corked. She uncorked it. A shivering mist spiraled upward, coiling around them like a cloak. Star Umbralis Velis Star. From the old texts, makes us undecided, not fully seen, not fully real. They descended. The vault chamber waited below, circular and vast, lit by a single orb of captive starlight. In its center, on a pedestal of fused obsidian, rested a stone archway, cracked, incomplete, humming with dormant power. Around it, robed figures in ash-gray cowls turned as one, wands raised. "You are too late," their leader intoned, voice echoing unnaturally. "The seventh door opens only for the pure of purpose. You seek to control it." Hermione stepped forward, the veil of mist clinging to her like smoke. "We don't want to control it. We want to understand it. And you," she paused, eyes blazing, "you would use it to erase what you fear. That's not purpose. That's fear wearing a mask." The air trembled. Then Harry moved. Wand flashing, he cast expulso star not at the enemies, but at the chamber's support runes. Stone shrieked. Dust rained down. In the chaos, Hermione darted forward, chanting in a language older than Hogwarts, her hands outstretched toward the arch. Light erupted, and the blank sphere, still clutched in Harry's satchel, flared to life, new words etching themselves in fire. "Star, the door does not choose the worthy. It reveals the ones who finally listen. Star." Dust swirled in the slanted shafts of afternoon light cutting through the fractured ceiling of the Hall of Prophecies. The air tasted old, dry, parchment, iron, and something faintly electric, like the breath before a storm. Harry stood with one hand braced against the cold stone wall, his fingers pressing into a groove no one had touched in centuries. Beside him, Hermione held the prophecy sphere between both palms, its surface still blank, smooth as glass, yet pulsing with a warmth that hadn't been there moments before. "It wasn't like this when we found it," she whispered, her breath a soft ripple in the silence. "It was cold, dormant." Harry nodded, not taking his eyes off her. "But now it's waiting." A low hum rose from the sphere, barely audible at first, like the vibration of a bowstring plucked in another room. Then the surface shimmered, and a single line of script began to form, silver letters curling into existence, as if written by an invisible hand. They both leaned closer. "Star, when the Seeker and the Keeper stand beneath the seventh gate. Star, star, the buried truth shall speak in time's own breath." Star, Hermione exhaled sharply. "It's writing itself, right now. As if we triggered it," Harry finished. His pulse tapped a steady rhythm against his ribs. This wasn't like the other prophecies. Those were fixed, frozen in time. This was alive, responding. More words appeared, slower now, deliberate. "Star born of war's shadow, bound by silence. Unspoken. Star, star. Their union draws the veil between worlds thin." Star, Hermione's fingers tightened around the glass. "Union?" Harry didn't answer. He couldn't. The word hung between them, heavy with meanings they danced around for years. Since the tent in the Forest of Dean, since her fingers brushing his after the battle at Hogwarts, since every time they almost said something and didn't. The sphere pulsed again. The hum deepened, resonating through the floor, up their spines. "Star, to mend what was broken beyond memory. Star, star, they must walk the path of the forgotten watchers. Star, star, where starlight was first taught to speak. Star," Hermione's voice trembled. "The forgotten watchers. That's not in any modern text. I've only seen them mentioned once, in a fragment from the lost Athenaeum of Arcturus. They were said to guard thresholds, between realms, between times." "And they left a path?" Harry asked, "if the prophecy is to be believed. But this," she looked down at the sphere, now glowing faintly from within. "It's not just about some ancient order. It's about star, a star, a star. It named us, not by name but by role, Seeker and Keeper. You're the Seeker, always have been, and I, the Keeper of knowledge," Harry said softly, "of truths." She met his gaze then, and for a moment, the hall fell away. The broken shelves, the ministry workers still clearing debris in the distance, even the weight of the prophecy, it all blurred. There was only the space between them, charged, familiar, and suddenly terrifying. "What if it's not just metaphor?" she asked. "What if union means—" "I know," Harry said, stepping closer. "I've always known." The sphere flared, the words vanished, and rewrote themselves in a new sequence. Faster now, as if urgency had taken hold. "Star, beware the hand that covets the in-between. Star, star, for the hollow choir stirs beneath the city's bones. Star, star, he who wears another's face walks near." Star, Hermione gasped. "The hollow choir, that's not legend, that's a prison. A sealed realm beneath the old Roman foundations, beneath Londinium's heart. And he who wears another's face, Polyjuice can't last that long. Not without dark magic." Harry's wand was in his hand before he realized he'd drawn it. His eyes scanned the shadows between the towering shelves. The air had changed, cooler, watchful. "We're not alone," he murmured. A faint scuff echoed from the far end of the hall. Then silence. Hermione tucked the sphere into the enchanted satchel at her side, woven with undetectable extension charms and layered in anti-theft wards. "They'll come for this, for us." Harry looked at her, really looked, at the faint smudge of dirt on her temple, the way her hair caught the light, the quiet strength in her stance. Then let them come. He reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate, and as their fingers intertwined, the sphere pulsed once more, warm, approving, alive, like a heartbeat beginning. The air in the Hall of Prophecies had always been still, thick with dust and silence, but tonight it hummed. A low, resonant thrum pulsed through the marble floor, rising from the very stone beneath Harry's boots. He stood frozen just outside the newly revealed archway, the seventh door, its obsidian surface now alight with veins of silver light that coiled like liquid starlight. The others were gone, sent home by Kingsley's order, but Harry had lingered. Something in his chest had tugged him back, a whisper beneath the ribs, the same instinct that once warned him of danger in the forbidden forest. Beside him, Hermione exhaled sharply. "It wasn't doing this an hour ago." "No," Harry murmured. "It was dormant. But now it was waking." The blank prophecy sphere, once a featureless orb of smoky glass, lay cradled in its bronze stand at the chamber's center. Moments ago, the final words had etched themselves across its surface in glowing script, a sentence written as if by an invisible hand. "Star, when the equal souls return the lost name, the veil shall breathe again." Star. Then silence. Completion. And now, this. A crack of light split the door's surface, not breaking it, but opening it from within. No hinges, no mechanism, yet the door peeled back like a flower unfurling at dawn. Cold air rushed out, smelling of moss and old magic, of places long buried beneath time. Harry stepped forward, but Hermione caught his arm. "Wait, we don't know what's in there." "I think we do," he said quietly. "It's not about what's in there. It's about what it wants from us." The sphere pulsed once, and the words on its surface shimmered, then rearranged, letters sliding like sand in an hourglass. Hermione gasped. "It's changing." They leaned closer. The new inscription glowed hotter, the script sharper. Star. The name was never gone. "It waits in the hollow of memory, beneath the weeping stone." Star Harry frowned. "Weeping stone, that sounds like—" "The ruins at Caerdathil," Hermione finished. "In Wales, the old druidic circle near the base of the mountain. There's a monolith there, they call the Morning Pillar. Legends say it weeps every winter solstice." He turned to her, the light from the sphere reflecting in her wide eyes. "You're saying this prophecy, it's not just predicting the future, it's alive, it's guiding us. It's responding to us," she corrected, voice hushed. "To something we did, something we star, our star. Harry, this isn't a static record, it's a conversation." A low chime resonated through the chamber, and the door flared brighter. From beyond the threshold, shadows shifted, not creatures, not shapes, more like echoes, faint silhouettes, human-sized, stepping forward only to dissolve like mist. One form lingered longer than the rest, tall, robed, hands outstretched as if in offering, or warning. Hermione clutched the locket at her throat, the one she'd worn since the war, the one with the tiny engraving of a serpent coiled around a rose. "They're not ghosts, they're memories, trapped, or waiting." Harry felt it then, a pressure in his temples, a whisper in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. "Star, you are the balance, you are the key that turns both ways. Star." He looked at Hermione. "They're not waiting for saviors, they're waiting for us, not just anyone, Us. She met his gaze, and for a moment, the years between them collapsed, the stolen glances after battles, the silences heavy with things unsaid, the way her hand always found his when no one was looking. Then we go, she said simply. To Caer Dathel, to the weeping stone. He nodded. Together. The door pulsed once more, then the light receded, sinking back into the stone, like breath drawn inward. The sphere dimmed, the echoes vanished. But the air still trembled, and the silence now felt expectant. Like the world had leaned in, holding its breath, and somewhere beneath the roots of an ancient mountain, a stone began to weep. Rain lashed against the arched windows of the Hall of Prophecies, tapping like impatient fingers against the glass. The air hummed with restrained magic, thick and electric, pressing against Harry's skin like a warning. Before them, the seventh door stood half-lit in the flickering blue glow of enchanted torches, its surface carved with runes that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. The blank prophecy sphere hovered inches above the pedestal, but now, after weeks of silence, it shimmered, letters forming one by one, slow and deliberate, as though written by an invisible hand. Star. The balance turns upon the will of the two who see, yet do not wish to choose. Star. Hermione exhaled, her breath fogging in the cold. It's still writing. Harry didn't answer. He was watching the door, the ancient wood splitting down the center with a hairline crack, not from decay, but as if something inside were pushing to get out, or inviting them in. He remembered the journey, the forgotten ruins beneath Stonehenge, the whispering archives beneath Prague's old town, the blood-stained grimoire in a monastery, high in the Carpathians. Each clue had led here, back to the ministry, to this moment. And through it all, silence. Between them, around them, in the spaces where words should have been. "We don't even know what's on the other side," Hermione said, her voice low. The Order of the Veil believed the door was never meant to be opened. They warded it, erased it from records, died to keep it hidden. And yet, Harry said slowly, they left the prophecy to find us. She turned to him, eyes sharp, or to trap us. The Malefics faction believes this door will restore pure blood dominion. The Auror Council wants it destroyed. And we're standing here, holding the key, with no idea what we're deciding between. A gust shivered through the hall, rustling the rows of glass spheres. Some chimed faintly, like distant bells. Harry stepped closer, his fingers brushing the edge of the pedestal. The sphere flared, and new words appeared. Star, to open is to change. To seal is to forget. One world dies with each choice. Star. Hermione's breath caught. It's not just about power. It's about reality. What if opening it unravels something fundamental? What if sealing it means losing something we can't afford to lose? Harry looked at her then, really looked. The years between them, the silences after battles, the letters never sent, the way she'd stood by him when no one else understood, rose like a tide. He'd spent so long running from choices, from destiny, from the weight of being Star, the Star Harry Potter. But this wasn't about fame, this was about trust, about her. I don't want to decide alone, he said. You never have, she whispered. The runes on the door flared crimson. A low groan echoed through the hall, as if the building itself were waking. Somewhere deep beneath them, alarms began to sound, dull, muffled, but growing louder. The Aurors were coming. And if they didn't act now, the decision would be taken from them. Hermione reached out, her hand hovering over the sphere. If we open it, we do it together. Harry nodded. Together. Their fingers touched the glass at the same moment. A silence deeper than space fell. Then, light. Not fire, not spell, but pure, liquid radiance that poured from the sphere and wrapped around the door. The crack widened. Beyond it, shadows shifted, not of stone or wood, but of something older, of wind through forgotten trees, of voices speaking in a language before words, of a world that had dreamed itself into being, and was now remembering. The door began to open, and somewhere in the space between breaths, Harry felt Hermione's hand tighten around his. They stepped forward. Rain lashed the obsidian steps, leading down into the chamber of the veil, its rhythm sharp and insistent against the stone. The air hummed with latent power, thick as wet velvet, pressing against Harry's skin like a second layer of clothing. Torchlight flickered in uneven bursts, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the ancient runes carved into the walls. Runes Hermione had spent weeks deciphering, tracing their origins to a forgotten sect known only as the Viridians, keepers of the first balance. She stood at the threshold, her breath visible in the cold. The door, the seventh, rose before them, not glass and silver like the others, but forged from a blackened metal that drank in the light. No prophecy sphere sat in its cradle. Instead, a hollow cavity pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat beneath stone. "It's not a recording," Hermione whispered, her voice taut with revelation. "It never was. It's a conduit." Harry stepped beside her, the scar on his forehead tingling, not with pain but with something older, deeper, a resonance. "Then what's it conducting?" "The first magic," she said, turning to him. Her eyes, wide and dark with understanding, held his. Not spells, not wands. The magic before magic, the breath beneath the world. The Viridians believed it was alive. They didn't create magic, Harry. They answered it. A gust of wind surged from the doorway, though there was no air below ground. The torches guttered. Harry raised his wand instinctively, star lumos star, but the flame sputtered and died. Around them, the runes began to glow, one by one tracing a spiral inward toward the door. Hermione reached into her robes and pulled out the final artifact, a shard of crystal, milky and veined with gold, unearthed beneath the ruins of a Roman temple in Gaul. "This is the keystone," she said. "It's not about opening the door, it's about consenting to it." "Consenting?" She nodded. "The door only opens when two souls, bound by truth, not blood, choose to see what magic truly is, together." Harry exhaled slowly. "And if we're wrong, then the balance collapses, the magic unravels. Or worse, it chooses someone else to speak through." He looked at her then, not just as a friend, not just as the woman who'd stood beside him through fire and war, but as the one person who had always known the cost of knowledge. He saw the quiet courage in the sapphire jaw, the way her fingers trembled only slightly as she held the crystal. "I trust you," he said simply. She smiled, small, fragile, real. "I know." Together they stepped forward. The moment their hands touched the door, the world dissolved. Not in light, not in sound, but in silence so complete. It felt like falling. Harry saw, not with his eyes, scenes unfolding. Forests older than memory, breathing in unison, rivers singing in tongues long lost, stones that remembered the weight of gods. Magic wasn't a tool. It was a conversation, a pact, and they had broken it. Centuries of spells wrenched from the earth without permission, wands forcing will upon the unseen, the ministry controlling, containing, silencing. The door wasn't a prophecy, it was a plea, and now it was awake. Harry gasped as sensation returned, dropping to his knees. Hermione swayed beside him, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. "We have to tell them," she whispered. "All of them. Not just the ministry, the world." But even as she spoke, the ground trembled. Far above, alarms shrieked through the ministry. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hall. Harry met her gaze. "They won't listen." "No," she said, rising, her voice hardening. "But we'll make them hear." The door behind them remained open, just a crack. But through it, a low golden light now spilled, warm as dawn, steady as a promise. Rain tapped softly against the high-arched windows of the ministry atrium, a quiet rhythm that felt almost mocking in its normalcy. The grand fountain, once gilded with golden statues of witches and wizards, now modestly repaired, rippled under droplets that fell from the enchanted ceiling, mimicking the storm beyond. People moved through the hall with hushed urgency, their faces tight with the weight of what had been uncovered. Posters fluttered on bulletin boards, charmed to update in real time. Star seventh door confirmed active, prophecy ongoing, ministry advisory level. Amber, Star Harry stood at the edge of the crowd, hands buried in his coat pockets, watching the chaos with the detached calm of someone who had seen too many worlds end and begin again. He didn't need to hear the whispers to know what they were saying. Star Potter's name again. Of course it is. Star. But this time, it wasn't his fate alone, etched into the unseen threads of magic. It was something older, deeper. Something that had waited centuries for the right moment, and the right people. A breath of warm air stirred behind him, and he didn't need to turn to know it was her. "It's strange," Hermione said, her voice low. To think that something hidden for so long would choose now to reveal itself. Not through power, not through force, but through us just walking toward it. Harry turned. She stood with her arms wrapped around a worn leather satchel, its edges frayed from months of travel. Dust still clung to her boots, Greek limestone, he thought, from the ruins near Delphi, though she'd tried to clean them. Her hair, wilder now from wind and magic and sleepless nights, framed a face that had aged in ways not measured by years. "We weren't supposed to find it," he said. "Not yet, maybe not ever. But its star wanted star to be found." She nodded slowly, eyes distant. The Order of the Seventh Veil believed prophecy wasn't just prediction, it was invitation. A call to those willing to listen, to star, remember star, what magic once was, not control, not dominance, balance. A silence settled between them, filled only by the distant echo of footsteps and the murmur of officials debating behind closed doors. They had stood in this same atrium only months ago, arguing with bureaucrats who claimed the Hall of Prophecies was fully catalogued, that no door could have remained hidden. Now, the very foundation of magical history was being rewritten, and they were at the center of it, not as heroes, not as saviors, but as witnesses. "I keep thinking about that night in Prague," she said after a moment. "When the sigils lit up beneath the old chapel, you reached for my hand before the floor gave way. You didn't even think about it." He exhaled, a faint smile touching his lips. "Instinct. Is that what we're calling it now?" She looked at him then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them, older than the prophecy, deeper than the journey. Years of near misses, of glances held too long, of words swallowed in the name of duty. "I thought if we ever found the truth," she whispered, "it would answer everything. But all it did was ask more questions." "Maybe that's the point," he said. "Magic doesn't give answers. It gives choices." Around them, the ministry pulsed with new energy, scribes hurrying to document, aurors stationed at newly warded corridors, scholars debating the ethics of interpreting and active star prophecy. The blank sphere had not stopped writing. Each day more words appeared in a language that shifted between runes, Latin, and something older still, decoded slowly, painfully, by Hermione's tireless mind. And yet the core remained elusive. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "if we were always meant to find it together?" Harry met her gaze, rainlight catching the green of his eyes. "I stopped wondering that a long time ago." She smiled then, small, real, the kind that reached her eyes only when she let her guard down, and for the first time in years he didn't look away. Rain tapped a quiet rhythm against the lidded windows of the borrowed cottage in Glenafric, the kind of steady hush that made silence feel alive. The fire had dwindled to embers, painting the room in flickering gold, catching in the damp strands of Hermione's hair, as she sat cross-legged on the hearth-rug, a worn journal open in her lap. Harry stood by the window, watching the mist curl over the loch like breath, his reflection fractured in the rain-streaked glass. They hadn't spoken in over an hour, not since returning from the standing stones at Callanish, where the final clue had shimmered beneath their feet, in Gaelic runes only Hermione could decipher. The air between them had grown thick, not with tension, but with the weight of things finally ready to be said. "You knew, didn't you?" she asked softly, not looking up. "Back in Rhone, when the mosaic lit up, you knew it was leading here. To us." Harry exhaled, his breath fogging the glass. "I didn't want to believe it." She closed the journal, fingers lingering on the cover. It wasn't just about the prophecy. It was about a star. The whole time it was about us. He turned. Her face was calm, but her eyes were bright, too bright. He crossed the room slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots, and sat across from her, close enough to feel the warmth of the hearth between them. "The door didn't choose us because we're powerful," he said, "or because we survived. It chose us because we've always balanced each other. You're the truth I never knew how to say, and I'm the recklessness you'd never allow yourself." A small smile touched her lips. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's dangerous," he admitted. "When I'm with you, I don't just feel safe. I feel star seen star, and that scares me more than any curse." She reached out, then hesitated, her hand hovering above his. "After the war, I thought if I kept busy, if I kept moving, The silence between us wouldn't matter. But it did. It always did. "I wrote you a letter once," he said, voice low. "After you left for Australia, I never sent it. Told you I loved you. Told you I was afraid I'd ruin it by saying it out loud." Her breath caught. "And now? Now I don't care if I ruin it. I just can't lie anymore." He took her hand, fingers threading through hers, calloused and sure. "I love you, Hermione. Not because of some ancient prophecy, not because we're part of some grand design, but because you're the first thought I have in the morning and the last before I sleep. Because you argue with me about house elf policy like it's a duel, and because you still smell like parchment and peppermint tea." Tears welled, but she didn't look away. "You're impossible, Harry Potter. You know that? I've been told. And I've spent years convincing myself that love was something that happened to other people. That it was messy and irrational and beneath me." She squeezed his hand. "Turns out it's just honest." Outside the rain softened. A single beam of moonlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the stone floor like liquid silver. "We still have to stop them," she said, voice steadier now. "The Aurum Circle won't stop hunting the door. They'll use it to control time, to rewrite history. I know, and it won't be easy. They have allies in every ministry, relics older than Hogwarts. We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. No more running, no more running. When their lips finally met, it was not like the stories. No fireworks, no orchestral swell. Just warmth and relief and the quiet certainty of two people who had spent a lifetime circling each other, finally stepping into the same light. The air in the Hall of Prophecies still hummed faintly, a low, thrumming echo beneath the silence, as though the stones themselves were reluctant to forget what had just occurred. Dust motes drifted in the dim blue light, catching the last remnants of the prophecy's glow as it faded into stillness. The door, ancient, iron-bound, etched with runes that had not seen breath in centuries, sealed shut again with a sound like a sigh, the lock reforming seamlessly into the stone. Harry stared at it, his breath unsteady. He could still feel the warmth of the sphere against his palm, the way the words had bloomed beneath his touch, written not in ink, but in light. Hermione stood beside him, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with the dawning weight of understanding. "It wasn't a memory," she whispered. "It was happening, now, as we watched." Harry nodded. "And it mentioned us, by name." She turned to him then, the faintest tremor in her voice. "Not just us, the door, the key, the blood of the witness, and the voice of the silenced." She exhaled sharply. "That's not prophecy, that's instruction." He looked at her, really looked, at the way the light caught the gold in her hair, at the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the determined set of her jaw. They had spent years running from silence, from the things left unsaid between them, and now, fate, or something older, had carved their names into a door older than Hogwarts. "I don't know what it wants," he said quietly, "but I think it's not done with us yet." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her robes and pulled out the small folded parchment she'd been carrying since Cornwall, the sketch of the standing stones at Avery, marked with a symbol that matched one on the door. Her fingers traced the edge, worn thin from handling. "This isn't coincidence, Harry. The order that built that door, they left a trail. And we're meant to follow it." He crossed his arms, feeling the chill of the hall seep into his bones. "Or someone wants us to think we are." "Maybe," she conceded. "But the prophecy lit up when you touched it. And then when I spoke," she paused, "it responded, like it recognized us." A pause settled between them, not empty, but full, thick with the past, with all the words they'd swallowed over the years. The war, the years after, the way she'd left for Australia, the way he'd buried himself in horror work, the letters that started frequent and faded into silence. And now this impossible door, this living prophecy, pulling them back together, as if no time had passed at all. "We should tell someone," he said, though he already knew what she'd say. "Who?" she asked, voice low. "Kingsley? The Wisengamot. Half of them still don't trust anything that comes from the Department of Mysteries. And the other half would try to weaponize it before they even read it." He looked down at his hands. "And if we're wrong?" "Then we're wrong together," she said simply. He met her eyes then, and something shifted. something that had been holding its breath for 10 years. A quiet understanding passed between them, not spoken, but felt deep in the marrow. They had always been stronger side by side. Outside, the ministry stirred back to life, footsteps in the corridors, the distant chime of the lifts, the rustle of owls delivering reports. But here in this hushed hall, time seemed to bend. The door remained closed. The sphere, once blank, now held words only they had seen. And somewhere out there, the first clue waited, buried in stone, in song, in blood. Hermione slipped the parchment back into her pocket and turned toward the exit. "We leave at dawn," she said. Harry followed, his footsteps soft against the stone. "Where to?" "A monastery in the Carpathians. There's a manuscript, suppressed, nearly destroyed, that mentions the keepers of the seventh threshold. If it's real, it might tell us who we're really working for." He glanced back once, at the sealed door. It stood silent, watchful. And for the first time in years, Harry Potter didn't feel like he was running toward danger. He felt like he was coming home,